This is Daily Story, where the scariest and most haunting tales are told every day. The strange noises in the night, the silent figures in the dark, the memories no one dares to recall, all come alive here. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell, if you're brave enough. And don't forget to leave a comment, because who knows, your story might be the next haunting tale we tell. Now let's begin.
In his 12 years with the Sterling County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Isaac Thorne had come to believe the Arizona desert had a voice. It spoke in the dry rasp of the wind across sun-scorched earth, in the midnight howl of a coyote, and in the profound, heavy silence that fell between those sounds. But the call that came in that mid-August afternoon was of a different kind of silence, a human one, which was always the most unsettling. The heat was a physical presence, an oppressive weight that smothered the small town of Oakhaven. The air warped and shimmered above the asphalt, and the thermometer outside the station had been stuck at a blistering 118 degrees Fahrenheit since noon. It was the kind of heat that baked away civility and left behind only raw, frayed nerves. "Isaac, we got another one." Sheriff Alastair Brody's voice was gravelly, worn down by decades of dealing with the darkness that festered at the edges of his jurisdiction. He did not look up from his desk as he tossed a manila folder onto Isaac's. The folder slid across the worn wood, coming to a stop against a half-empty mug of cold coffee. It felt heavier than paper ought to. Family of four, Brody continued, finally meeting Isaac's gaze. His eyes were tired. Went camping up in the Whisperwind Mountains 4 days ago. Have not been heard from since. Isaac felt that old, familiar knot tighten in his gut. It was a cold, hard feeling that defied the suffocating heat of the room. He opened the folder and studied the photographs inside. The Holloway family. There was a father, Mark, 40 years old, an architect from the suburbs of Oakhaven with a kind, open face. The mother, Evelyn, 38, a schoolteacher whose smile seemed to radiate genuine warmth even from the glossy photo paper. And their 2 daughters, Chloe, 15, and Maya, 11. They looked like the quintessential American family, clean-cut, smiling, the kind of people who ventured into a wilderness once a year to feel a manufactured connection with nature before retreating back to the safety of their air-conditioned lives. Their car, Isaac asked, his voice low, found it at the Serpent's Coil trailhead yesterday morning, Brody said, leaning back in his squeaking chair. Search and rescue did a preliminary sweep. Found their tent set up about 2 miles in. Everything's there. Isaac. Sleeping bags, food, half-full water bottles. Even their damn cell phones and wallets. But no sign of the family. It is like they were beamed up. The knot in Isaac's stomach twisted. The Whisperwind Mountains had a reputation. A dark history whispered in hushed tones by locals and sensationalized by out-of-town ghost hunters. Every year, those ancient, jagged peaks east of Oakhaven claimed someone. Hikers, overcome by the heat and the disorienting landscape, would wander off the trails. Some were found days later, dehydrated and delirious, their stories a jumbled mess of shadows and tricks of the light. Others were never found at all, their disappearances becoming another layer in the mountain's grim folklore. But an entire family vanishing from their campsite, leaving everything behind, that was different. That felt wrong on a fundamental level. Who called it in? Mark's brother. They were supposed to be back Sunday night for his kid's birthday party. When they were a no-show, he got worried and drove out to check their usual spot yesterday. Isaac stood up, the legs of his chair scraping against the floor. He grabbed his wide-brimmed hat from his desk. "I will head out there now. I will take Phillips with me." "Already tried," Brody grunted. "He is tied up with that mess over in Blackwood Gulch. You'll have to take the new guy, Vance." Deputy Leo Vance was fresh out of the academy, barely 23 years old with a face that had not yet learned how to hide its apprehension. He had less than 3 months on the job, most had spent dealing with traffic violations and domestic squabbles. Isaac found in the break room, nervously adjusting the pristine crease on his uniform trousers. "Vance, you are with me," Isaac said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "Bring extra water and your hiking gear." We are going into the Whisper Winds. The drive to the Serpent's Coil trailhead took just under an hour. The patrol car's air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the oppressive sun. Isaac used the time to brief Vance on the Holloway family and the long, sordid history of disappearances in the area. The younger deputy listened intently, his knuckles white as he gripped the dashboard, his eyes flicking between Isaac and the massive, alien rock formations that grew larger and more menacing with every mile. How many people? How many go missing out here every year? Vance asked, his voice a little tight. Officially, maybe 3 or 4, Isaac said, keeping his eyes on the road. Unofficially, hard to say. Not everyone gets reported right away. Sometimes we find remains years later, picked clean by the vultures and the desert sun. Becomes a John Doe case. Another file in a dusty cabinet. They pulled into the gravel parking area, parking next to the Holloway's blue Toyota Highlander. It was coated in a fine layer of ochre dust, looking forlorn and abandoned. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they gathered their gear from the trunk. Isaac watched Vance, who was already sweating through his uniform, his face flushed. First rule of desert searches. Kid, Isaac said, handing him an extra canteen of water. Dehydration will kill you faster than any boogeyman out here. It is a quiet, insidious killer. It tricks your mind, makes you see things that are not there. By the time you realize you are in trouble, it is often too late. The hike to the campsite was brutal. The trail, barely a whisper on the hard-packed earth, wound through skeletal stands of saguaro cacti, their arms raised to the merciless sky as if in surrender. The air was still and thick, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the gravel and their own labored breathing. After an hour of steady climbing into the rocky heights, the heat pressing in from all sides, they spotted a splash of lurid orange against the muted reds and browns of the landscape. The Holloway's tent was nestled in a small clearing, dwarfed by massive, brooding boulders that seemed to lean in as if sharing a secret. Isaac approached with practiced caution, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm out of habit. The silence here was different from the silence of the desert. It was a waiting silence, expectant. Sheriff's Department. He called out, his voice sounding small and intrusive. Anyone here? Only the silence answered. The tent was an expensive 4-person model, properly staked and secured. The rainfly attached despite the fact that it had not rained in months. Isaac unzipped the entrance flap and peered inside. The interior was pristine, for sleeping bags were laid out neatly, as if their owners had just stepped out for a moment. Backpacks were propped against the tent walls. A small, stuffed rabbit, worn with love, sat on the smallest sleeping bag Maya's. It was a gut-wrenching detail, a tiny icon of lost innocence in a place that felt profoundly wrong. "Check this out," Vance called from behind the tent, his voice hushed. Isaac joined him and found what had captured the rookie's attention. A camp stove sat on a flat rock, a pot of half-cooked pasta still sitting on the burner. 4 plates were set out on a folding camp table, each with a portion of food. Forks rested on the plates, as if dropped mid-bite. A bottle of wine was uncorked, 2 glasses half full. They were in the middle of dinner. Vance stated the obvious, his young face a mask of disbelief. They just got up and walked away. Isaac crouched, studying the scene with a tracker's eye. There were no signs of a struggle. No overturned chairs, no scattered belongings, no blood. Even the family's expensive digital camera sat undisturbed on the table. Nothing was out of place, except the family itself. The sheer normality of the scene was what made it so terrifying. It was a perfectly preserved moment of domestic life, abruptly and inexplicably terminated. Animals, Vance suggested, though he sounded less convinced this time. Isaac shook his head slowly. What kind of animal makes a family if we're abandoning their meal, without knocking over a single plate, without leaving a single track? He pulled out his radio again, hoping for a miracle. He got only static. The mountains were notorious for swallowing signals. He would have to document everything the old-fashioned way and report back at the trailhead. "Let us search the perimeter," Isaac said, his voice grim. "Spiral pattern, 50 yards out. Look for anything. A scuff mark, a broken branch, a piece of torn cloth. Anything. They spent the next hour combing the area around the campsite, the setting sun casting long, distorted shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Isaac, who had grown up hunting these same mountains with his father, was one of the best trackers in the department. But the hard-packed, sun-baked soil revealed nothing. No clear footprints leading away from the camp, no drag marks, no sign that anyone had left the clearing in a hurry or under duress. It was as if the earth itself had conspired to keep the secret. As the sun finally began its descent below the western peaks, painting the rocks in haunting shades of orange and blood red, Vance called out. His voice was sharp, laced with something that sounded like fear. He was standing near a cluster of boulders about 30 yards from the camp. "Deputy Thorne, you need to see this." Isaac jogged over, finding Vance standing at the entrance to a narrow slot canyon, a dark fissure between two colossal, weathered rocks. The younger deputy's face had gone pale, the color drained from it as if by a phantom hand. "What is it?" Isaac asked, his own heart starting to pound a heavy, rhythmic beat against his ribs. Vance did not speak. He just pointed a trembling finger into the deep shadows between the rocks. Isaac pulled out his heavy-duty flashlight and aimed its powerful beam into the gap, about 10 feet in. Something reflected the light, something small, pale, and unmistakably white. Isaac squeezed into the narrow slot, the rock walls pressing close on either side, their surfaces cool against his sweat-soaked uniform. The temperature dropped immediately in the deep shade, and the air grew still and stale, smelling of dust and something else, something faintly metallic. As he got closer, his flashlight beam illuminated what Vance had spotted. It was a human hand, pale and motionless, fingers slightly curled, extending from behind a sharp bend in the rock. "Stay here," Isaac ordered, his voice a low growl. He drew his weapon, the click of the safety echoing unnaturally in the confined space. He sidled deeper into the slot, his boots silent on the sandy floor, until he could see around the corner. And then he saw him. Mark Holloway sat propped against the rock wall, as if he were merely resting. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing, reflecting the beam of Isaac's flashlight with a glassy, vacant sheen. There were no visible injuries, no blood, nothing to suggest violence. He was just dead. Isaac holstered his weapon and checked for a pulse, knowing with a dreadful certainty that he would not find one. The body was cold, unnaturally so, despite the residual heat of the day. Rigor mortis had already fully set in. He would have been dead for at least a day, maybe longer. "Vance," Isaac called out, his voice tight. "Radio for backup and the medical examiner. Tell them we have at least one body." "At least." "One." Vance's reply was a shaky whisper. Isaac did not answer. He was already moving deeper into the narrow, winding canyon, his flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. He found Evelyn Holloway 20 feet farther in the exact same position as her husband, sitting upright against the wall, her hands resting in her lap, eyes open and empty, her face a serene, frozen mask. Beyond her, arranged in the same horrifying tableau, were the children, Chloe and then little Maya, their small bodies sitting in a perfect, silent row in this natural tomb. For bodies. A family of 4, all sitting in a line in this narrow slot canyon, as if they had willingly walked in here, sat down in an orderly fashion and simply ceased to exist. In his 12 years, Isaac had seen the gruesome aftermath of car accidents, the brutal reality of domestic violence, the quiet despair of overdoses. But this was different. This was wrong in a way that defied explanation, in a way that made his skin crawl and the hair on his arms stand on end. He meticulously photographed everything with his phone, his hand steady despite the tremor he felt deep inside. Then he carefully backed out of the slot canyon, feeling as though he were retreating from a sacred, desecrated place. Vance was pacing nervously, the radio clutched in his hand. "Dispatch says they can't get anyone out here until morning," he said, his voice cracking. "They want us to secure the scene and wait." "We are not waiting here overnight," Isaac said, his tone final. The thought of spending a night in this place, so close to that silent, watching family, was unbearable. We marked the location, we seal it off with tape, and we come back at first light with a full team. They worked quickly, their movements brisk and efficient, stringing bright yellow crime scene tape across the entrance to the slot canyon and around the perimeter of the silent campsite. As they worked, the last vestiges of twilight vanished, plunging the desert into a profound, star-dusted darkness. Isaac watched Vance, who jumped at every nocturnal sound, the distant call of coyote, the rustle of wind through a brittle bush, the skittering of some unseen creature in the rocks. "What do you think happened to them?" Vance asked as they began the long hike back to their vehicle, their flashlight beams dancing nervously in the dark. "I do not know. Kid," Isaac admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "But I have never seen anything like it." They reached the parking area just after 9 p.m., the silence of the drive back to the station stretching between them, thick with unspoken questions and shared, creeping dread. Isaac was about to unlock the patrol car when he noticed it a vehicle that had not been there when they would arrived. A beat-up, old Ford pickup truck was parked at the far end of the lot, almost hidden in the shadows of a large mesquite tree. No lights were on, and no one was visible inside. "Stay here," Isaac told Vance, his senses on high alert. He approached the truck cautiously, his hand on his weapon, his footsteps muffled by the gravel. The cab was empty, but when he placed his hand on the hood, the engine was still warm. Fresh footprints, a single set, led from the driver's side door toward the trail, disappearing into the darkness. Isaac memorized the license plate and the distinctive dream catcher hanging from the rearview mirror before returning to Vance. "Someone else went up the trail," Vance asked, his eyes wide. "Maybe," Isaac said, his gaze fixed on the dark, looming silhouette of the mountains. "Let us get out of here." They drove back to Oak Haven in a heavy silence, the image of the Holloway family seared into Isaac's mind, sitting in that narrow canyon, like statues in forgotten crypt, waiting for something or someone that would never come. The next morning, under a sky the color of bleached bone, Isaac led a team of 6 deputies and a medical examiner back to the site. The desert seemed to hold its breath as they made the grim hike, the morning sun already promising another day of suffocating heat. The campsite was just as they had left it, an eerie diorama of interrupted life. The slot canyon was undisturbed, the yellow tape a garish slash against the ancient rock. But something else had changed. On the rock wall, directly above where Mark Holloway sat, someone had carved 5 words into stone. The cuts were fresh, the raw rock beneath starkly pale against a darker, weathered surface. They had been made sometime during the night. They saw what they should not. Dr. Eris Thorne, the county medical examiner and Isaac's younger, a strange sister, spent 3 hours examining the bodies in situ before they were carefully removed. Their relationship was a landscape of old wounds and unspoken resentments, but in a professional setting, she was the best that was sharp, meticulous, and unflappable. Or so he had thought. When she finally emerged from the slot canyon, her face was grim, her usual clinical detachment replaced by a look of profound unease. Their preliminary assessment was baffling, she told Isaac later, away from the others, her voice low. No wounds, no signs of poisoning, no indication of environmental factors like heat stroke or dehydration. Their bodies are pristine, for lack of a better word. If I had to guess, and this is purely speculative until I get them back to the lab, I would say they all suffered massive, simultaneous cardiac arrest. But that is impossible. Isaac, a whole family's heart stopping at the exact same moment. It does not happen. What about drugs? He pressed. Some kind of airborne toxin, a gas. I will run a full toxicology panel, but I doubt we will find anything, she said, shaking her head. There is no cyanosis, no petechial hemorrhaging, none of the usual markers. Whatever killed them, it is not something I have ever seen before. It is like something just switched them off. As the bodies were being carefully loaded into bags for transport, Deputy Phillips called Isaac over to the campsite. "Found something weird in the tent," he said. Inside, Phillips showed him a leather-bound notebook that had been tucked into a side pocket of Mark Holloway's backpack. Most of it contained typical vacation notes, mileage logs, expenses, observations about trail conditions. But the last entry, dated the night they disappeared, was different. The handwriting started neat and precise, but devolved into a frantic scrawl. Asterisk August 14th, 10:47 p.m. Strange lights on the ridge above camp. Not flashlights or a campfire. Too bright, too steady, and they move in ways that are not. Right, Evelyn thinks it is other campers, but there is no one else on the trail registry. I checked before we left. The girls are scared. Maya won't come out from her sleeping bag. Moving deeper into the rocks might have been a mistake. We thought it would be more sheltered, but now it feels like a trap. Someone's been watching us. I can feel it. A pressure in the air. A feeling of being scrutinized. If something happens to us, tell my mother we loved asterisk. The entry ended there, the pen trailing off the page in a jagged line, as if the writer's hand had been violently jerked away. Isaac spent the next week immersed in the Holloway case. The truck from the parking lot belonged to a local man named Silas Croft, a reclusive 60-year-old hermit who lived in a dilapidated trailer on the edge of the wilderness, surrounded by a scrap yard of rusted metal and broken dreams. When Isaac tracked him down, Silas claimed he would have been checking his illegal deer traps that night. Nothing more. But there was a tremor in the old man's hands and a haunted look in his eyes, a deep-seated nervousness that went far beyond normal police anxiety that told Isaac there was more to the story. You ever see strange lights up in the whisper winds at night? Silas, Isaac asked, his voice casual. The old man's face went white, a stark contrast to his sun-weathered skin. I do not go up there at night anymore, he rasped, his eyes darting towards the looming mountains as if they might be listening. Anymore, Isaac prodded gently. Not for 13 years. Not since. He stopped himself, clamping his jaw shut. Since what? Silas. The hermit looked around nervously, his gaze scanning the empty desert around his trailer. You would not believe me if I told you. You would think I was a crazy old coot. Try me. Silas was quiet for a long moment, the only sound a buzzing of flies around a nearby pile of refuse. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. There's people up in those mountains. Not hikers or campers. They live up there, in the old mine shafts. They do not like outsiders. What kind of people? Isaac asked, a chill tracing his way down his spine despite the heat. The kind that has been there since before the Apache, Silas said, his eyes wide. Before the Spanish. Before anyone. My grandfather used to tell stories his grandfather told him, but I never believed them. Figured they were just campfire tales to scare the kids. Then I saw the lights myself. And I saw them. Isaac wanted to dismiss it as the paranoid ramblings of a son-addled hermit, but the raw, undiluted fear in Silas's eyes seemed utterly genuine. These people, Isaac said, choosing his words carefully, what do they do to outsiders? They watch them, Silas whispered, his voice trembling. They study them. And if the outsiders see something they should not, the old man made a sharp, cutting motion across his throat, a gesture more eloquent than any words. Over the following weeks, Isaac dug deeper, losing himself in the cold case files and historical archives of Sterling County. The pattern of strange disappearances in the Whisperwind Mountains went back decades, possibly centuries. He found accounts from Spanish conquistadors in the 1600s, writing in their journals about entire expeditions vanishing without a trace in what they called the Montañas del Viento Susurran. He read translations of Apache oral traditions that spoke of forbidden areas, sacred mountains where the shadow people lived, places where even the most hardened warriors would not venture. Then he found the file he was looking for. In the late 1960s, a group of 4 geology students from Arizona State University and their professor had disappeared while mapping old mines in the Whisperwinds. Only one of them was ever found. A young man named Elias Vance, discovered wandering the desert, catatonic, his hair turned stark white, He was unable to speak a coherent word about what had happened. Isaac requested the full file. Elias Vance, now in his 70s, lived in an assisted living facility in the nearby town of Stonefall. Isaac drove down the next day, the desert landscape blurring past his window. He found Elias in a wheelchair by a large window, staring out at the distant, hazy silhouette of the Whisperwind Mountains. When Isaac introduced himself and explained why he was there, Elias's gnarled hands began to shake uncontrollably. "You found more bodies," Elias said, his voice a dry, rasping whisper. It was not a question. "A family of 4, Isaac confirmed. They died. Strangely." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the mountains. Sitting in a row, he murmured, eyes wide open, like they saw something that just stopped their hearts. Isaac felt a profound chill seep into the room, a cold that had nothing to do with the facility's air conditioning. "How? How did you know that?" "Because that is how we found Professor Albright," Elias said, tears beginning to well in his faded blue eyes. "And Janet, and Tom. They were just sitting there in the antechamber." Tears rolled down the old man's weathered cheeks, tracing paths to the wrinkles of life defined by one terrible day. "We were mapping the old Peralta mine when we stumbled upon it. A chamber. It was ancient, older than any mine. The walls were covered in symbols, pictures that seemed to move and writhe in the torchlight. And then they came." "Who came?" "Elias," Isaac asked, leaning closer. Elias shook his head violently. "Not who," he rasped. "What?" "They looked human from a distance, tall and slender, but up close, their eyes were wrong. Too large, too dark, like looking into empty space, like looking into a starless night sky. They did not speak, not with words. They just watched us. And when Professor Albright tried to photograph the symbols, to document them, Elias shuddered a full-body tremor. The scream he made, the sound he made when he looked at them through the camera's lens. I will never forget it. Then he ran. We all ran, but only I made it out. Where is this chamber? Elias." The old man grabbed Isaac's arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his fingers digging into Isaac's flesh-like talons. "Do not look for it," he pleaded, his eyes wild with fear that had not diminished in 50 years. "Do not go back there. Some things are meant to stay buried. Some doors are meant to stay closed." But Isaac could not let it go. For people were dead. A young deputy was dead. And there would be more if he did not find answers. He spent his off hours poring over topographical maps and old mining surveys, comparing them with the locations of every documented disappearance. A pattern emerged, a tight cluster of incidents all centered around a specific, remote region of the mountain, a region riddled with old, forgotten mine shafts and natural cave systems. 2 weeks after the Holloway family's funeral, Isaac made a decision. He was going back. Alone. At night, he followed the coordinates he would triangulate from his research. He told no one where he was going, leaving only a sealed letter for his wife in his desk drawer, to be opened if he did not return in 24 hours. The hike in the darkness was treacherous. The familiar landscape was transformed into an alien world of menacing shapes and deep, impenetrable shadows. More than once, a primal fear urged him to turn back, but the memory of those 4 bodies, arranged like a macabre display in that stone-cold fissure, drove him forward. Around midnight, deep in the heart of range, he found it, a mine entrance, partially concealed by a rockfall, exactly where his calculations suggested it would be. The tunnel beyond was not a typical mine shaft. The walls were too smooth, the angles too precise. This had been carved with purpose, not for ore, but for something else. Isaac's flashlight beam penetrated only a few yards into the inky blackness. He was about to enter when he heard it, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel behind him. He spun around, his hand flying to his weapon, his heart hammering against his ribs, to find Deputy Leo Vance standing there, his young face set with grim determination. "What the hell are you doing here?" Isaac demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. "Following you," Vance admitted, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "I knew you would come back. You are not the type to let something like this go. And I had to know. Elias Vance. He was my grandfather." The revelation hit Isaac like a physical blow. He saw the family resemblance now, in the set of the jaw, the intensity in the eyes. "Go back to your car. Vance. This is too dangerous," Isaac ordered. "That is why you need backup," Vance countered, pulling out his own flashlight. "I am not leaving. We go in together, or not at all. He was my family. I need to know what took him. What broke him." Isaac wanted to argue, to pull rank, but he saw the same stubborn determination in the young deputy's eyes that he saw in his own reflection every morning. It was a resolve forged in grief and a desperate need for answers. "Fine," Isaac relented with a sigh, "but you do this my way. Stay close. Stay quiet. And no matter what you see, you do not look directly at their eyes. Understand?" Vance nodded, his expression grim. They entered the tunnel together, the oppressive darkness swallowing them whole. The temperature dropped immediately, and their breath formed misty clouds in the beams of their flashlights. The tunnel descended at a steady, unnatural angle, turning and branching in ways that defied the logic of mine construction. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes, they emerged into a large, cavernous chamber. Isaac's light swept across the walls, revealing the symbols Elias had described. They were not quite drawings, not quite writing, but something in between, something ancient and alive that seemed to shift and ride at the edge of his vision. "God Almighty," Vance whispered in awe and terror. "What is this place?" Before Isaac could answer, they heard it again. A sound like the mountain itself was inhaling and exhaling. A deep, rhythmic, resonant breathing that seemed to vibrate up from the very rock beneath their feet. Then, at the edge of their light beams, there was movement. Figures emerged from the shadows. At first glance, they appeared human tall, slender, with 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where it should be. But as they drew closer, the profound wrongness of their existence became terrifyingly apparent. Their movements were too fluid, too graceful, as if they had no bones or joints. Their skin was pale to the point of translucence, glowing faintly in the reflected light. And their eyes, Elias had been right. They were vast, empty pools of darkness, voids that seemed to pull at Isaac's vision, threatening to swallow him whole. "Do not look directly at them," Isaac repeated, his voice a strained whisper, remembering the fate of the Holloway family. But Vance was already staring, transfixed, his mouth slightly agape. His breathing became rapid, panicked. What are they?" he stammered. The figures stopped just outside the circle of their light. There were 6 of them, standing perfectly still, watching, waiting. Their silence was more menacing than any threat. Isaac grabbed Vance's arm, his grip like a vice. "We are leaving. Now, back away, sir. Do not turn your back." They began to retreat, their boots scuffing softly on the dusty floor. But the figures moved with them, an obscene parody of their movements, maintaining the same precise distance. It was a horrifying silent dance, predator and prey locked in a slow motion ballet of terror. They were halfway back to the tunnel entrance when Vance stumbled, his flashlight swinging wildly across the vast chamber. For a split second, the beam illuminated something else in the far reaches of the cavern, a shape barely visible in the darkness, a form so alien and complex that Isaac's mind could not quite process it. It was organic yet geometric, ancient yet somehow alive, and it was watching him with an intelligence that was vast, ancient, and utterly non-human. Vance made a sound, a low whimper that built into a full-throated scream of pure, unadulterated terror. He clutched his chest, his eyes wide, and dropped to his knees. "No, no, Vance." Isaac grabbed him, trying to drag him toward the tunnel. "Do not look at it. Close your eyes." But it was too late. Vance's eyes were locked on the distant shape. His pupils dilated to the point that they looked entirely black. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak, but no words came out, only a terrible, ragged, wheezing sound. The 6 pale figures began to close in, their fluid movements accelerating. Isaac made a split-second decision. He pulled out his service weapon and fired 3 shots into the air. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off the ancient walls. For a moment, everything stopped. The figures retreated slightly, disoriented by the concussive blast. Isaac used that precious moment to hoist Vance's dead weight over his shoulder and run. He ran blindly through the disorienting tunnels in near darkness, Vance's weight an agonizing burden. Behind them, he could hear the pursuit, not footsteps, but a sliding, scraping sound that grew closer with each passing second. They burst from a mine entrance into the cool desert night, gasping for air. Isaac did not stop. He half ran, half stumbled down the treacherous mountain trail, Vance still unconscious over his shoulder. It was only when they reached the relative safety of the parking area that he dared to look back. The mountains were dark and silent. Nothing had followed them out. Isaac loaded Vance into his vehicle and drove directly to the nearest hospital, ignoring speed limits and radio protocols. On the way, Vance regained a semblance of consciousness, but he remained incoherent, mumbling about eyes in the darkness and shapes that could not exist, his body racked with tremors. At the hospital, a battery of tests found no physical cause for his condition. Like the Holloway family, he appeared to have suffered some kind of massive psychological trauma that had manifested physically. He was sedated and transferred to a psychiatric facility for observation. Isaac filed his report, a carefully curated version of the truth. He wrote that they had investigated an old mine shaft and that Vance had suffered an extreme panic attack, possibly induced by claustrophobia and stress. Sheriff Brody accepted the report without question, more concerned about the department's liability than the horrifying truth. But Isaac knew that truth would eat at him for the rest of his life. He had seen something in that mountain, something that should not exist. And worse, he knew it was still there watching and waiting. 3 days later, Blake Vance died in his room at the psychiatric facility. The official cause of death was listed as sudden cardiac arrest. But the night nurse on duty told a different story to anyone who would listen. She swore she had seen someone in Vance's room just moments before he died. A tall, pale figure that seemed to melt back into the shadows when she turned on the lights. Isaac attended the funeral, standing in the back as Vance's family grieved for a son and grandson lost to a darkness they would never understand. After the service, Sheriff Brody pulled him aside. "I am closing the Holloway case," Brody said, his voice low and firm. "Official cause of death, exposure and dehydration, leading to heart failure. That is not what killed them, and you know it," Isaac said, his voice tight with anger and grief. "Maybe not," Brody conceded, his eyes avoiding Isaac's. "But it is what is going in the report. And Isaac, I do not want to go back to those mountains. That is a direct order." Isaac nodded, but they both knew he was lying. How could he stay away when he knew what was up there? How could he let other families venture into those mountains, blissfully unaware of what waited for them in the darkness? Over the next month, Isaac descended into a state of obsessive research. His life became a collection of dusty archives, crackling microfilms, and obscure historical texts. He found references in old Spanish missionary documents to Los Observadores Silenciosos, the Silent Watchers. Apache legends, when interpreted by a tribal elder he cautiously consulted, spoke of Inti-Enchi, the shadow people who lived within the sacred mountains and acted as guardians against those who would defile their lands or uncover their secrets. Even the Hohokam, the indigenous peoples who had lived in the region centuries before, had left petroglyphs on the canyon walls not of animals or hunters, but tall, slender figures with large, hollow eyes, a clear warning etched in stone for 1,000 years. He also found a pattern in the modern disappearances. They came in cycles, roughly every 10 to 12 years. A cluster of vanishings and strange events over the course of a year or two, then a decade of quiet. The Holloway family had marked the beginning of a new cycle. Isaac tried to warn people, subtly at first. He suggested to the Forest Service that certain trails be closed for environmental reasons. He lobbied for more prominent signs warning of the dangers of abandoned mine shafts. But without official backing from the Sheriff's Department, His concerns were dismissed as the overzealousness of a deputy spooked by a tough case. Tourism was too important to the local economy to be hindered by unsubstantiated fears. Then the calls started coming in, a trickle at first, then a steady stream. Hikers reporting strange, steady lights on the high ridges at night. Campers hearing impossible sounds echoing from the canyon's voices that were not quite human. Footsteps that did not match any known animal. And then, inevitably, the disappearances began again. A college student named Amelia, Vance no relation to Leo, a cruel twist of fate vanished from a popular day hiking trail. Her camera was found on the path, the last photo showing a blurred, pale shape in the background of a selfie, something tall and indistinct standing among the Palo Verde trees. An experienced outdoorsman named Caleb Thorne again, no relation, whose cam was discovered with everything intact except for him. His journal's final entry was a single, terrifying sentence. Asterisk, they are here. God help me, they are here. Asterisk, a young couple, whose car was found at a trailhead with the doors wide open and the engine still running. A half-eaten bag of chips on the center console. Each time, Isaac responded to the scene. Each time, he found the subtle, terrifying signs that others missed. The too-perfect arrangement of the abandoned gear, the complete absence of any sign of the struggle, the palpable feeling of being watched, even in broad daylight. He tried to establish a pattern, to predict where they would strike next, but the entities in the mountains seemed to choose their victims by a logic he could not comprehend. The only consistency was that the victims were always alone or in small groups, always in the remote regions he had identified, and always during the new moon, when the desert night was at its absolute darkest. 6 weeks after the Holloway incident, Isaac made a decision. He could not stop what was happening through official channels, but maybe he could understand it. Maybe he could find a way to appease it. He prepared meticulously weapons, extra supplies, night vision equipment, and most importantly, a detailed map of where he was going and when he expected to return. He gave the sealed envelope containing the map and a letter to his wife, with strict instructions to open it and give it to Sheriff Brody if he was not back in 48 hours. He returned to the hidden mine shaft on a moonless night, the stars like chips of ice in the black velvet sky. But this time, he was not alone. Silas Croft, the hermit who had been in the parking lot that fateful night, had agreed to guide him. After weeks of careful persuasion, Silas had admitted he knew more than he would initially let on. His grandfather had been part of a small, secret group that had encountered the entities back in the 1940s. Most of that group had died or gone insane, but few had survived, passing down knowledge of how to coexist, or at least how not to provoke what lived in the mountains. There are rules, Silas said as they approached the mine, his voice a low whisper that was quickly swallowed by the immense silence of the desert. Do not look directly at them. Do not try to photograph them. Do not take anything from their sacred places. And never, ever go deeper than the first chamber. What is deeper? Isaac asked. The source, Silas breathed, his eyes wide with ancestral fear. The thing they guard. My grandfather saw it once, for just a second. He never spoke of what it was, only that it was older than the earth, and it was. Waiting for something. They entered the mine together. This time, Isaac was prepared for the wrongness of the tunnels, the impossible geometry that seemed to defy the laws of physics. When they reached the great chamber, the entities were already there, 6 of them, standing in a silent semicircle as if they had been expecting them. Silas stepped forward and began to speak in a language Isaac did not recognize, not Apache or Spanish, but something older, a series of guttural clicks and soft, melodic tones. The entities remained still, their vast, dark eyes fixed upon them. Then Silas carefully placed something on the ground, a deerskin bundle containing items Isaac could not identify in the dim light: minerals, dried herbs, carved pieces of wood. An offering. One of the entities moved forward, its motion liquid and profoundly unsettling. It reached for the bundle with appendages that were not quite hands. For a single, heart-stopping moment, it turned its vast, dark eyes on Isaac, and he felt his heart stutter, a cold dread washing over him. But then it retreated with the offering, and all 6 of the entities seemed to fade back into the deep shadows at the edge of the chamber. We can stay for 13 minutes, Silas whispered, his voice trembling. No more. That is the tradition. Isaac used the precious time to study the chamber, trying to burn every detail into his memory. The symbols on the walls were not static. They moved slowly, cycling through complex patterns that hurt his eyes to perceive directly. The very air felt different here, charged with a strange, ambient energy that made his skin crawl. And always, there was the overwhelming sense of being watched by something vast, ancient, and utterly incomprehensible. When the 13 minutes were up, they left quickly without looking back. Outside, under familiar stars, Isaac was surprised to find he was shaking. What did you give them? He asked Silas. Things they need, the old man said vaguely. Things they can't get for themselves down there. It is an old arrangement. We provide, they tolerate our presence. Sometimes, and when they do not tolerate it. Silas looked back at the dark, silent mine entrance. Then people like the Holloways die. It is a balance. A terrible, fragile balance. We have to warn people. We have to close the mountains. Silas let out a short, bitter laugh. You think no one's tried back in the 60s after the geology students? A group of government men came here. Scientists, military types, people with real authority. 12 of them went into the deep chambers. None came out. The official story was a mine collapse, but there was no collapse deputy. They just were not anymore. Isaac felt sick, so we just let people die. We minimize it, Silas said, his face grim in the moonlight. We guide people away from the dangerous areas when we can. We make the offerings to keep them satisfied. It is not perfect, but it is better than the alternative, which is... Silas's face was a mask of pure dread. They come down from the mountains. The implications of that statement haunted Isaac for weeks. He threw himself into research again, discovering accounts from all around the world of similar entities, things that lived in the liminal spaces, ancient beyond measure, indifferent to human life except when their domains were encroached upon. He found a declassified report from a Russian mining operation in Siberia that had broken through into a natural chamber and lost 36 workers in a single night. A KV system in Romania where entire villages had been found dead, arranged in careful, ritualistic patterns. An island in the Philippines where the U.S. military had been testing experimental weapons in the 1950s, only to abruptly abandon the tests after encountering something that violated the known laws of physics and perception. The pattern was global, and it was terrifyingly old. Isaac began his quiet campaign of misdirection in earnest. He could not officially close the mountains, but he could make certain areas less appealing. He anonymously tipped off a local news station about drug cartel activity in the most dangerous zones. He had trail markers mysteriously disappear or get moved. He even resorted to placing roadkill carcasses near popular camping spots to suggest increased predator activity. It worked to a degree. The disappearances slowed to a trickle, but they did not stop entirely. And Isaac knew it was only a matter of time before someone else, someone determined, stumbled onto the truth. That someone turned out to be a journalist named Julia Croft. She had noticed the cyclical pattern of disappearances and had come to Oak Haven to investigate. She was smart, persistent, and worst of all, she had resources. She had already filed Freedom of Information Act requests, interviewed dozens of locals, and was planning to publish a major expose. Isaac tried to discourage her, to ward her off of veiled threats and vague warnings. But she mistook his obfuscation for a cover-up, which, in a way, it was. Her determination only hardened, and she hired local guides to take her into the very areas Isaac had tried so hard to quarantine. The night she disappeared, Isaac was off duty, but he heard the call coming over his scanner. Her abandoned rental car at the Serpent's Coil trailhead. Her camp, discovered empty the next morning. But unlike the others, Julia had been live streaming her hike to her thousands of followers. The stream had cut off abruptly, but not before capturing something. A tall, pale figure at the edge of the darkness, watching. The video went viral before the authorities could contain it. Within days, a circus of conspiracy theorists, cryptid hunters, and morbid thrill seekers descended on the Whisperwind Mountains. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Isaac worked 18-hour days trying to manage the chaos. They officially closed the main trails, but people found other ways and drawn by the allure of the forbidden. They posted guards, but the mountains were too vast, too wild to patrol effectively. And then, just as Silas had warned, they came down. It started with livestock. Cattle found dead on ranches bordering the wilderness, arranged in perfect circles. Their hearts inexplicably stopped. Then pets began disappearing from backyards in the small communities at the foot of the mountains. Finally, the first human casualty in a populated area. An elderly man in a nearby town who had been sitting on his porch at dusk. His wife found him an hour later, his eyes wide open, dead of an apparent cardiac arrest. But the look of abject terror frozen on his face suggested he had seen something terrible in his final moments. Isaac knew what had to be done. He gathered Silas and the 3 others who knew the truth, an Apache elder named Jonah, a park ranger named Eva, who had lost her partner to the entities years ago, and, surprisingly, Sheriff Brody, who finally admitted he had known more than he would let on, his silent a burden he had carried for years. They went into the mountains together on a new moon, carrying offerings not just from themselves, but from the community items of value, food, water, even vials of blood drawn from volunteers who did not know its true purpose. They went deeper than Isaac had ever gone before, following paths known only to Silas and Jonah. In the deepest chamber they dared enter, they performed a ritual that Jonah's grandfather had taught him, one that supposedly dated back to the first contact between humans and the entities. It was part negotiation, part supplication, and part threat a stark reminder that while humans were fragile, they were also numerous and capable of making the mountains uninhabitable for everyone if pushed too far. Isaac never saw what answered their call. Jonah warned them not to look, and Isaac kept his eyes firmly on the ground. But he heard a sound like the mountain breathing, like space itself tearing. He felt its presence, vast and ancient and utterly alien. And somehow, impossibly, he heard it speak, not in words, but in pure meaning that appeared directly in his mind. The agreement was reestablished. The entities would return to the deep places. The deaths would stop. But there were conditions. The mountains must be respected. Certain areas must remain forever untouched. And occasionally, when the stars were right and the desert sang its oldest song, offerings must be made. They agreed. What choice did they have? The group emerged from the mountains at dawn, exhausted and forever changed. Isaac felt as though he had aged years in a single night. Silas never spoke a coherent word again, communicating only in gestures and written notes. Jonah died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, as if his final purpose had been fulfilled. Sheriff Brody officially closed large sections of the Whisperwind Mountains, citing environmental restoration and geological instability. The media attention gradually died down as no new disappearances occurred. The viral video was eventually explained away as a clever hoax, the pale figure nothing more than a hiker in thermal gear. But Isaac knew the truth. He became the reluctant keeper of the agreement, making sure the offerings were made in secret, the boundaries respected. He guided people away from the dangerous areas with carefully placed warnings and bureaucratic obstacles. He monitored the cycles, watching the sky, watching the land, watching for any sign that the entities were stirring once more. 5 years passed. Isaac had nightmares most nights, dreams of vast dark eyes and impossible geometries. His marriage suffered under the weight of the secrets he kept. His health declined, but he continued his vigil because he knew what would happen if he did not. Then, last month, a development company with deep pockets and political connections announced plans to build a luxury resort and golf course in the Whisperwind foothills, the proposed site overlapping with the very zones that were meant to remain untouched. Isaac tried to stop it through official channels, filing protests, citing environmental concerns, and protected Native American sites. But the company had a team of high-priced lawyers and more money than God. The permits were approved. The night the survey team went missing, Isaac was not surprised. for men vanished without a trace. Their expensive equipment found arranged in a perfect, silent circle. The company blamed it on cartel activity and, in an act of staggering hubris, sent in a private security team. They disappeared, too. Isaac knew what was coming. The entities had been patient for 5 years, but human greed was about to break the ancient agreement. He made one last trip into the mountains, alone this time, carrying only his service weapon and the letter to his wife. He found them waiting in the first chamber, more numerous than he had ever seen before. They did not move as he approached, did not react as he spoke. He explained about the development, about the impossibility of stopping it through human means. He offered himself in exchange for more time, a final, desperate chance to find another solution. They refused, not in words, but in a cold, absolute feeling of finality that washed over him, leaving no room for negotiation. Isaac left the mountains knowing that the cycle was about to begin again, worse than before. The development would proceed. People would die. And eventually, when the deaths became too numerous to ignore or explain away, the mountains would be closed permanently. But by then, the entities might have spread beyond their ancient boundaries, down into the unsuspecting cities and towns of the valley below. He drove to his office, wrote his final report, sealed it, and placed it in a safety deposit box with instructions for it to be opened only if he disappeared. Then he did what he had always done. He went back to work, responding to calls, maintaining the illusion of normalcy, and waiting for the darkness to descend. The last entry in Deputy Isaac Thorne's personal journal, found in his abandoned patrol car at the Serpent's Coil trailhead, read, "Asterisk, they're not evil. That is what people do not understand. They are not good, either. They simply are like gravity or radiation. We built our civilization in their shadow, never knowing they were there, until we pushed too far. Now there is no going back. The mountains belong to them. They always have. We were just borrowing the space between their dreams. But the dream is ending. And when they fully wake, God help us all, asterisk." Deputy Isaac Thorne's body was never found. The resort development was officially canceled after 17 people disappeared in 3 weeks. The Whisperwind Mountains are now a federally protected wilderness area, closed indefinitely to the public due to unprecedented geological instability. But on certain nights, when the desert wind blows cold and the stars seem too bright, locals report seeing strange, steady lights on the forbidden peaks. Not flashlights or campfires, but something older, something that is watching and waiting. The call came in at 3:47 a.m., jarring Deputy Morgan Davies from the first decent sleep he had had in weeks. October in Red Rock County meant the tourist season was winding down, but also meant more missing hikers. People underestimating the desert, chasing perfect Instagram shots, and ignoring the ubiquitous posted warnings. "Morgan, we need you at the station." The dispatcher's voice crackled through his bedside radio, sharp and urgent. "We have got another one, maybe 2, missing hikers." "Roger that," Morgan mumbled, rubbing his tired face. "Which trailhead?" "That is the thing," the dispatcher said. "This one's different. You need to see what we found." Morgan dressed in the dark, careful not to wake his daughter, Lily. Ever since his wife had left, it had just been the two of them, and his irregular hours were not making single parenthood any easier. He left a note on the kitchen counter, gone to work. "Be back before you leave for school. Love you," and drove through the empty streets of the town of Crimson Peaks toward the sheriff's station. The red rocks were barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, but Morgan knew they were there, silent sentinels ringing the town. Massive sandstone formations that drew millions of visitors each year, Cathedral Spire, Serpent's Bell, the Arch of Whispers. Breathtaking by day, but at night they became something else. Shadows played tricks, sounds echoed strangely, and every canyon could be a path to nowhere. Sheriff Marcus Thorne was waiting in his office, along with 2 other deputies Morgan recognized, Evan Carter and Chloe Jennings. On Thorne's desk was an evidence bag containing a newer-looking smartphone. Olivia Reed, 28, from California. Thorne began without preamble, his voice weary. Went hiking yesterday morning on the Arch of Whispers Trail with her boyfriend, Liam Foster, 31. Neither came back. Her roommate called in around midnight. Arch of Whispers, Morgan muttered, a familiar unease settling in. How many times do we have to tell people not to hike out there alone? They were not alone, Chloe said, her expression tense. That is the weird part. Look at this. She unlocked the phone and played a video. It showed a young woman, presumably Olivia, standing on the famous natural arch known as the Arch of Whispers. The red rock stretched out behind her, magnificent in the morning light. She was smiling, talking to whoever was holding the camera, presumably Liam. Is not this amazing? Olivia was saying, her voice full of excitement. I can't believe we have it all to ourselves. The camera panned across the landscape, a breathtaking panorama of red rock and stark blue sky. Then back to Olivia. She was still smiling, but something in her expression had shifted, a subtle tension around her eyes. She was looking at something off camera, to the cameraman's right. Liam, she said, her smile vanishing. Liam, who is that? The camera swung around wildly, showing nothing but red rock and blue sky. Then it dropped, showing a frantic view of feet in dusty earth, and the video cut off. That is it, Morgan asked, a chill running down his spine. Check the timestamp, Chloe said. 10:47 a.m. Yesterday. But look at this. She swiped to the next video. It was darker, grainier, as if it had been filmed in low light. Morgan could make out what looked like the interior of a cave or an overhang. Someone was breathing heavily, panicked, terrified. They are still following us, a male voice whispered. Liam, undoubtedly. God, Olivia. They are still following us. SHHH. Olivia's voice was barely audible. They will hear you. The camera moved slightly, showing a glimpse of Olivia's face. She was crying. Dirt and what looked like blood streaked across her cheek. We have to go deeper, Liam whispered. Maybe there is another way out. No, Olivia said, her voice filled with a primal horror. No, we can't. You saw what is down there. It is better than. A sound interrupted her. Footsteps, but wrong. Too many, too synchronized, like a dozen people walking in perfect, rhythmic unison. The camera shook as Liam apparently started running. The last few seconds were a blur of darkness and motion. Then nothing. Timestamp on that one is 8:23 p.m. Chloe said, her voice almost a whisper. Almost 10 hours after the first video. Morgan studied the phone. Where did we find this? At a trail junction about 2 miles from the Arch of Whispers, Evan said, just sitting on a rock in the middle of the trail, like someone placed it there for us to find. Search and rescue went out at first light, Thorne said. Found their car at the trailhead, backpacks at the Arch, but no sign of them. We have had teams out all day. Nothing. Morgan knew the area well. He would hiked every trail in Crimson Peaks over his 15 years with the department. The Arch of Whispers area was popular but treacherous. Steep drop-offs, unstable rock, and a maze of side canyons that could disorient even experienced hikers. I will take a team out, Morgan said, focus on the caves and overhangs if they were hiding from someone. From who? Thorne interrupted. This is Crimson Peaks, not Juarez. We do not have people stalking tourists on hiking trails. Morgan wanted to argue, but Thorne was right. Crimson Peaks was a peaceful town. Its biggest crimes usually involved drunk tourists or petty theft. But something about those videos bothered him. The synchronized footsteps, the sheer terror in Olivia and Liam's voices. They were not running from wildlife. Give me Carter and 2 volunteers from Search and Rescue, Morgan said. We will do a grid search of the canyon system east of the Arch of Whispers. Thorne nodded. You have until dark. If you do not find anything, we are calling in state resources. An hour later, Morgan was on the trail with Evan and 2 search and rescue volunteers, Isaac Howell, a local rock climbing guide, and Evelyn Nash, an experienced tracker. The morning sun painted the red rocks in brilliant shades of orange and gold, but Morgan barely noticed. He was focused on the ground, looking for signs. They reached the Arch of Whispers by 7 a.m. The natural sandstone arch stretched 50 feet across a steep canyon, with drops of over 100 feet on either side. Tourist season meant there should have been dozens of people here already, but Thorne had closed the trail. They had the place to themselves. Blood, Evelyn called out, crouched near the edge of the arch. Not much, just a few drops, but it is fresh, maybe a day old. Morgan photographed the blood, then looked around. The arch was exposed, with nowhere to hide. If Olivia and Liam had been running from someone, they would have had to go either back down the trail or into the rugged terrain beyond. If I were scared and running, Isaac said, I would head for those slot canyons to the east. Lots of places to hide. They spent the next 3 hours searching the canyons. The terrain was brutal. Loose scree, dense vegetation, and narrow passages that required careful navigation. They found more blood on a thorny bush, some torn fabric that might have come from a shirt, but no sign of Olivia or Liam. Around noon, Evan called out from a narrow side canyon. Got something. Morgan squeezed through the gap between two massive boulders and found Evan standing at the entrance to a cave. It was not on any map Morgan knew of, just a dark opening in the rock face, partially hidden by an overhang. Footprints, Evan said, pointing to the sandy ground. 2 sets going in, nothing coming out. Morgan drew his flashlight and his weapon. Evan, you are with me. Isaac, Evelyn, stay here and watch our backs. The cave was larger than it appeared from the outside. The entrance opened into a chamber about 20 feet across, with a ceiling high enough to stand upright. Morgan's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing smooth walls carved by centuries of water erosion. Look at this, Evan said, his light focused on the ground. There were footprints everywhere, dozens of them, maybe more, but they all looked identical. Same size, same tread pattern, arranged in perfect, parallel lines, like soldiers marching in formation. This is not possible, Morgan muttered. They pushed deeper into the cave. The main chamber narrowed into a tunnel that sloped downward. The air grew colder, and Morgan noticed something else. A smell, metallic, organic, wrong. The tunnel opened into another chamber, and Morgan's light swept across something that made him stop cold. Bodies, but not Olivia and Liam's. 3 corpses were arranged in a perfect line against the far wall. They were dressed in hiking gear, but the clothing was dated styles from the 90s, maybe early 2000s. The bodies had been mummified by the dry desert air. Skin pulled taut across bones, eyes gone, mouths open in what might have been screams. Jesus, Evan whispered. How long have they been here? Morgan approached carefully. Each body had a laminated card placed on its chest. He picked one up, angling it toward his light. Jennifer Walsh, missing since October 15, 1998. He checked the others. David Park, October 15, 2003. Marcus Rivera, October 15, 2008. All October 15th, Evan said, his voice trembling, 5 years apart. And today is October 15th, 2023. They looked at each other, the implication clear. Every 5 years on the same date, someone disappeared and ended up here, which meant Olivia and Liam were meant to be the next in line. A sound from deeper in the cave made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving in perfect synchronization. We need to go, Morgan said. Now. They backed toward the tunnel, but the footsteps were getting closer. Morgan could see lights, now flashlights or headlamps, at least 6 of them moving through the darkness with unnatural precision. Stop. A voice called out, male, flat, emotionless. You are trespassing. Morgan raised his weapon. Sheriff's Department. Identify yourselves. The lights stopped moving. Then, in perfect unison, 6 figures stepped into view. They looked human at first glance. 2 men for women, all dressed in civilian clothes. But something was profoundly wrong. They moved in perfect synchronization. Every gesture, every breath identical. Their faces were blank, expressionless, and their eyes reflected Morgan's flashlight like an animal's, glowing silver in the darkness. "You need to leave," they said, all 6 of them speaking in perfect unison with the same flat tone. "This is a sacred place." "We are looking for 2 missing hikers," Morgan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Olivia Reed and Liam Foster. Have you seen them?" The 6 figures tilted their heads, all at exactly the same angle, at exactly the same moment. "They have been chosen," the voices said in chorus, "as were the others. As you will be if you do not leave." Chosen for what? To feed the mountain, to maintain the balance. Every 5 years, the mountain must be fed. Morgan felt Evan tense beside him. This was insane. 6 people speaking and moving as one, talking about feeding a mountain, but the bodies behind them were real. The threat was real. "We are taking those bodies with us," Morgan said. "They have families who deserve closure. The mountain keeps what the mountain takes." The figures took a step forward, still in perfect unison. Morgan noticed something else. They were not breathing. Their chests did not rise and fall. They were perfectly, unnaturally still, except when they moved. "Evan," Morgan whispered, "when I say run." But Evan was already backing away, his hand on his weapon. The figures watched him retreat, their silver eyes unblinking. They made it to the tunnel before the figures moved again. Not walking. Something else. They seemed to flicker, appearing closer without taking steps, like a film skipping frames. "Run." Morgan and Evan sprinted through the tunnel, their flashlights swinging wildly. Behind them, those synchronized footsteps echoed off the walls, getting closer despite their head start. They burst from the KVE into blinding daylight. Isaac and Evelyn were waiting, weapons drawn. "What the hell?" Isaac started. "Move!" Everyone move. They ran, stumbling over rocks, crashing through brush. Morgan looked back once and saw the 6 figures standing at the KVE entrance, watching them flee. They did not pursue into the sunlight. Back at the sheriff's station, Morgan's report was met with skepticism. Thorne listened to the story, looked at the photos Morgan had managed to take of the bodies, and shook his head. "You are telling me there is a cult in the mountains that sacrifices hikers every 5 years. "I am telling you what we saw," Morgan said. "Those bodies are real. Those people, or whatever they are real. And they just let you go. They did not follow us into the sunlight," Morgan said. "Maybe they can't." Thorne was quiet for a long moment. "Then we are going back. In force. SWAT. State police. Backup. We are getting those bodies and finding our missing hikers." The operation was planned for dawn the next day. 20 officers, full tactical gear, helicopter support. Morgan tried to warn them about what he would seen, but most dismissed it as mountain hermits or drug addicts. Only Evan believed him, because Evan had seen it, too. They entered the KV at 0600 hours. The first chamber was empty. The tunnel was clear. But when they reached the second chamber, there was nothing. No bodies. No evidence they had ever been there. The ground had been swept clean. No footprints. No blood. Nothing. It was as if Morgan and Evan had imagined the whole thing. "You sure this is the right KV?" Thorne asked. Morgan knew it was. The shape of the walls, the slope of the tunnel. This was definitely the place. But everything was gone. They searched for 6 hours, expanding the grid, checking every KV and overhang in a 3-mile radius. They found nothing. No sign of Olivia and Liam. No evidence of the 6 figures Morgan and Evan had encountered. The search was called off at sunset. Olivia and Liam were officially listed as missing, presumed dead. The case went cold. But Morgan could not let it go. He researched the names he would seen on those cards. Jennifer Walsh, David Park, Marcus Rivera. All real people who had disappeared while hiking in Crimson Peaks. All on October 15th of their respective years. All from the Arch of Whispers area. He dug deeper, finding more disappearances with the same pattern going back decades. October 15th, 1993. October 15th, 1988. Always the same date. Always the same area. Always hikers who vanish without a trace. He also found something else. Local Native American legends spoke of the Hollow Ones, people who had sold their souls to the mountain spirits in exchange for immortality. They lived in the deep places, emerging only to collect payment for their bargain. Every 5 years, they had to provide the mountain with new souls, or they would lose their immortality and crumble to dust. Morgan shared his findings with Evan, who'd been doing his own research. "Look at this," Evan said, showing Morgan an old newspaper article from 1968. A group of 6 hikers had gone missing near the Arch of Whispers. They were found 3 days later, walking out of the desert in perfect formation. They claimed no memory of what happened, but all their friends and family said they were different afterward, cold, emotionless. They all left town within a month and were never seen again. You think those were our 6. The timing works. If they made their deal in 1968, they would have started collecting in 1973. Every 5 years since then, Morgan did the math, which means they have taken at least 10 people that we know of, probably more, and we can't do anything about it. No evidence, no bodies, no crime scene. They were right. Without physical evidence, there was no case. But Morgan could not stop thinking about Olivia and Liam. Were they dead, or were they something worse? New recruits for the Hollow Ones, transformed into soulless collectors for the mountain. 2 weeks later, Morgan was patrolling the trails near the Arch of Whispers, officially checking for illegal camping, unofficially looking for any sign of the missing hikers. The sun was setting, painting the rock's blood red when he saw her. Olivia Reed, standing on a ridge about 100 yards away. Morgan called out, but she did not respond. He climbed toward her, scrambling over loose scree. When he reached the ridge, she was gone, but there was something on the ground where she had been standing. A smartphone. It was Olivia's, or at least identical to hers. Morgan turned it on and found a single video file, dated that day. He played it. The video showed Olivia and Liam, but they were different. Their faces were blank, expressionless. Their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. They stood side by side, perfectly still, and when they spoke, it was in unison. "Stop looking for us," they said. "We have been chosen. We are part of the mountain now. In 5 years, we will choose others. This is the way." The video ended. Morgan looked around, but he was alone on the ridge. The sun had set and darkness was falling fast. He hurried back to his vehicle, the phone clutched in his hand. Back at the station, the phone was dead. No videos, no data, completely wiped. The tech team could not recover anything. It was as if the phone had never been used. Thorne closed the case the next day, citing lack of evidence and resources. Morgan was ordered to stop his unofficial investigation, but he could not stop. Every October 15th, he patrols the trails near the Arch of Whispers, warning hikers, watching for the Hollow Ones. It has been a year now. October 15th is coming again, but it is not a collection year. The mountain won't feed for another 4 years. But Morgan knows they are out there. Olivia, Liam, and the others, waiting in the darkness, bound to their terrible bargain. Sometimes hikers report strange experiences near the Arch of Whispers. Groups of people moving in perfect synchronization, voices speaking in unison, figures with silver eyes watching from the shadows. Morgan documents every report, building a file that no one else will look at. He knows he can't stop them. The Hollow Ones have been collecting for over 50 years. But maybe he can warn people. Maybe he can save a few lives. Or maybe in 4 years, he will be the one who disappears. The mountain is patient. The mountain is hungry. And the Hollow Ones always collect their due. The last entry in Morgan's personal journal, written just last week. Asterisk, I dream about them now. Standing in perfect formation, their silver eyes watching me. Sometimes Olivia and Liam are with them. Sometimes it is other faces' future victims, maybe, or past ones I could not save. They all speak with the same voice. The mountain must be fed. I have tried to find the Ka V again, but it is gone. Not sealed. Gone. As if it never existed. Evan thinks they can move the entrances, shift the rock itself. Impossible. But so is everything else about this. For more years until the next collection, I will be ready. I have to be, because if I am not, 2 more names will be added to the list of the disappeared. 2 more souls fed to whatever lives in the heart of the Red Rocks. I wonder sometimes if the Native Americans were right. Maybe some places belong to older things. Things that were here before us and will be here long after we are gone. Maybe we are the trespassers, and the hollow ones are just enforcing boundaries we can't understand. But I know one thing for certain. The Arch of Whispers is not just a tourist attraction. It is a gateway. And every 5 years, that gateway demands a payment. Asterisk. Deputy Carson Wells had been with the Pima County Sheriff's Office for only 6 months when he got the call that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was a Tuesday morning in November, unseasonably cold for southern Arizona, with rain clouds gathering over the Santa Rita Mountains. "Carson, you are with me," Sheriff Patricia Hawkins said, appearing at his desk. "We have got a situation in Helvetia." Carson looked up from his paperwork. Helvetia, the ghost town. That is the one. Some urban explorers called in something unusual. Helvetia had been a copper mining town in the early 1900s, abandoned for decades after the mines played out. Now it was just ruins in the desert, crumbling adobe walls, rusted mining equipment, and networks of dangerous tunnels that attracted thrill seekers despite numerous warning signs. They drove south from Tucson in silence, the sheriff unusually tense. Carson had learned not to push for information. Hawkins would share when she was ready. The rain started as they turned onto the dirt road leading to Helvetia, turning the desert dust into thick mud. The first thing Carson noticed was the smell. Even through the rain, there was something wrong in the air, a metallic, chemical scent with an underlying sweetness that made his stomach turn. 3 vehicles were parked at the entrance of the town, 2 Pima County patrol cars, and a beat-up Honda Civic that presumably belonged to the urban explorers. Deputies Shane Martinez and Crystal were standing with 2 young men who looked pale and shaken. "Sheriff," Martinez nodded. "These are the ones who called it in. Blake Morrison and Travis, both from the U of A. Blake, tall and lanky with a week's worth of stubble, was holding a camera with shaking hands. Travis, shorter and wearing a Wildcats hoodie, kept looking back toward the ruins as if expecting something to follow them. "Tell the sheriff what you told me," Martinez said. Blake swallowed hard. "We were just photographing the old buildings. Urban decay stuff for my photography project. We went into the old mine office because the door was open. That door was sealed last month." Hawkins interrupted. "County maintenance put a new padlock on it." "Well, it was open when we got here," Travis said. "The padlock was cut. We figured other explorers had been through. So we went in, and..." Hawkins prodded. Blake held up his camera. "Maybe you should just look at the pictures." Hawkins took the camera, and Carson looked over her shoulder as she scrolled through the images. The first few were typical urban exploration shots: peeling paint, broken windows, rusted filing cabinets. Then the photos changed. The main room of the mine office had been transformed into something out of a nightmare. The walls were covered in symbols drawn in what looked like dry blood geometric patterns that hurt to look at, mathematical equations that seemed wrong somehow, and repeated phrases in languages Carson did not recognize. But it was the center of the room that made Carson's blood run cold. 5 chairs arranged in a pentagram, and in each chair, "Are those mannequins?" Carson asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," Blake said quietly. "They were people, but they did not move, not even when we got close. They just sat there, staring." Hawkins handed the camera back. "Show us." Blake and Travis exchanged glances. We are not going back in there. You do not have to, Hawkins said. Just point us in the right direction. The mine office was a 2-story adobe building, one of the few structures in Helvetia that still had most of its walls and roof. The door was indeed open, the heavy padlock lying in the mud, clearly cut with bolt cutters. Hawkins drew her weapon. Carson, Martinez, you are with me. Crystal watched the witnesses. They entered slowly, flashlights cutting through the dim interior. The smell was stronger inside. Blood, decay, and something else Carson could not identify. Chemical, almost like formaldehyde. The main room was exactly as the photos had shown. 5 people sitting in chairs, arranged in a perfect pentagram. They were dressed in normal clothes, jeans, t-shirts, sneakers, ages ranging from maybe 20 to 50. All sitting perfectly still, eyes open, staring at nothing. Carson approached the nearest figure, a woman in her 30s with blonde hair. Her eyes did not track his movement. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. Her skin was cold, but not corpse cold. Something in between. They are dead, he said, but it is recent. No rigor mortis, no lividity. How long? Hawkins asked. I am no medical examiner, but based on body temp, maybe 6 to 8 hours. Martinez was examining the walls. Sheriff, you need to see this. One section of the wall was covered in newspaper clippings, some recent, others decades old. They all had one thing in common: missing persons cases from southern Arizona. Dozens of them. In the center was a map of the region with red pins marking locations. Helvetia was at the center, with lines radiating out to other abandoned mining towns: Ruby, Harshaw, Duquesne, Sunnyside. Each had multiple pins clustered around it. It is a network, Hawkins said. Someone's been using these ghost towns for something. Carson was studying the symbols on the walls when he noticed writing in English among the foreign scripts. The copper feeds the earth. The earth feeds the flesh. The flesh feeds the void. Cult, Martinez suggested. Maybe, Hawkins said. Call it in. We need the crime scene text, the works. And nobody else comes in here until... A sound from upstairs cut her off. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. All 3 deputies raised their weapons. Sheriff Department. Hawkins called. Come down with your hands visible. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, high and sing-song like a child's. You should not be here. It is not time yet. This is Sheriff Hawkins. I need you to come downstairs immediately. The Copper Prince does not like visitors. He is very particular about his timing. Carson and Martinez exchanged glances. Hawkins motioned for them to cover the stairs while she continued talking. What is your name? Are you hurt? We can help you. Laughter, but wrong. Multiple voices laughing in harmony. We do not need help. We are perfect now. The Copper Prince made us perfect. Carson moved to the base of the stairs, weapon raised. The second floor was dark, but he could see movement in the shadows. Multiple figures, all moving in strange, jerky motions like marionettes. How many are up there? Hawkins whispered. Before Carson could answer, they came down the stairs. 7 people, moving in perfect synchronization, but with unnatural, stuttering movements. Their faces were blank, eyes unfocused, mouths slightly open. Some were in various states of undress, their skin marked with the same symbols that covered the walls. Stop right there, Hawkins commanded. They did not stop. They moved toward the deputies with that same jerky gait, arms reaching out. Carson could see now that their fingernails had been replaced with copper wire, twisted into sharp points. Stop or we will fire. They kept coming. Hawkins fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The figures did not even flinch. They just kept advancing with those blank expressions and reaching hands. Out, everyone out. The deputies retreated, backing toward the door. The figures followed but stopped at the threshold, unable or unwilling to cross into the daylight. Outside, Hawkins immediately called for backup. All available units to Helvetia. We have multiple suspects, possible homicides. Potential public safety threat. While they waited, Carson watched the doorway. The figures had retreated into the shadows, but he could still see them moving inside. Occasionally, one would approach the threshold and stare out at them with those empty eyes. "What the hell are they?" Martinez asked. "Drugged," Hawkins said, though she did not sound convinced. "Has to be PCP. Bath salts. Something that explains behavior." But Carson had seen people on drugs. This was different. The synchronized movement, the lack of response to gunfire, the copper wire fingernails. This was deliberate, planned. Backup arrived within an hour. 6 patrol cars, a SWAT van, and an ambulance. They surrounded the building and SWAT prepared to enter. Non-lethal force if possible, Hawkins instructed. These people might be victims. SWAT entered in formation, but the building was empty. The 7 figures from upstairs were gone. The 5 bodies in the chairs remained, along with all the writing and symbols on the walls. A search revealed a hole in the floor of a back room, a tunnel leading down into the old mine shafts. They went underground. The SWAT commander reported. "The tunnel system is extensive. We would need a full search team. And even then," Hawkins made the call to seal the building and establish a perimeter. The medical examiner arrived and began processing the bodies. Dr. Sarah Kim, a 20-year veteran, looked increasingly disturbed as she worked. "Sheriff," she called Hawkins over. "You need to see this." She had opened one of the victim's shirts, revealing the chest cavity. The skin was marked with precise surgical scars. "These people have been operated on." "Dr." Kim said, "Recently. And look at this." She pressed on the chest, and instead of the usual resistance, there was a strange clicking sound. Using a scalpel, she made a small incision. Instead of blood, a dark, viscous fluid leaked out. And beneath the skin. "Is that copper?" Carson asked. "Copper wire." "Dr." Kim confirmed. "Woven through the muscle tissue. It is all through the body. I can feel it under the skin. Someone has literally wired these people." "Are they dead?" Hawkins asked. "Dr." Kim hesitated. "By any normal medical definition, yes. No heartbeat, no brain activity. But the cellular degradation is wrong. It is like they are preserved somehow. And this fluid," she collected a sample. "I will need to run tests. But it is not blood. It is something synthetic. They worked the scene until dark, collecting evidence, photographing everything. The symbols were documented, though no one could identify the language. The newspaper clippings revealed disappearances going back 40 years, all from the same cluster of ghost towns. As night fell, they heard it, singing from underground. Multiple voices in harmony, the words unclear, but the melody haunting. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the abandoned buildings. "We are pulling out," Hawkins decided. "Seal every entrance to the mine we can find. Nobody goes underground until we know what we are dealing with." They posted guards at the main entrance and established a command post at the edge of town. Carson volunteered for the first watch, paired with Crystal. Around midnight, they saw lights in the ruins, not flashlights, but a strange blue-green glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the underground singing. "Should we investigate?" Crystal asked. "Negative," came Hawkins' voice over the radio. "Observe and report only." The lights moved through the buildings, sometimes disappearing, only to reappear elsewhere. Carson counted at least a dozen separate sources. Then around 2 a.m., they converged on the mine office. Figures emerged from the building. Not the 7 from earlier, but new ones. They moved with the same jerky motions, their skin reflecting that blue-green light. They carried objects Carson could not identify at this distance. They formed a procession, moving toward the old smelter at the edge of town. The singing grew louder, and Carson could finally make out some of the words, though they were in English mixed with something else. Asterisk copper blood, copper bone, flesh of earth, earth of stone. The prince rises, the prince calls. Copper kingdom, copper thralls, asterisk. The procession disappeared into the smelter, and the singing stopped. The lights went out. The desert was silent, except for the sound of light rain on the patrol car's roof. "Did you see their faces?" Crystal asked quietly. Carson had, through his binoculars. Some of the figures in the procession had been reported missing weeks ago. Others, according to the photos they were collected, had disappeared years ago, but none of them had aged a day. Morning brought more disturbing discoveries. The 5 bodies from the chairs were gone, despite the building being under guard. The guard swore no one had entered or left, but the bodies had simply vanished, leaving only the indentations of the chairs and the dust where they would have been. Dr. Kim's preliminary analysis of the fluid was even more troubling. It is a synthetic compound I have never seen before. Organic polymers mixed with copper sulfate and other minerals. It is almost like artificial blood, but here's the really weird part. It is still active under the microscope. It moves, responds to stimuli. It is not alive exactly, but it is not dead either. The investigation expanded. State police were brought in, along with federal agencies. The mine entrances were sealed with concrete, but the singing continued underground. Motion sensors picked up movement in the tunnels, always heading deeper. Carson was assigned to research the history of Helvetia and the other ghost towns. What he found chilled him more than anything he would seen in that office. In 1911, just before the mine started closing, there had been an incident. 17 miners had been trapped in a cave at the Copper Queen mine. They were underground for 3 weeks before rescue teams reached them. But when they did, only one miner was still alive, a man named Josiah Prince. Prince claimed the others had died in the cave, but the bodies showed signs of cannibalism and worse. Prince was institutionalized, raving about the Copper God and the transformation. He escaped 6 months later and was never seen again. But there were stories, sightings of Prince near abandoned mines throughout southern Arizona, always accompanied by disappearances, always leaving behind those strange symbols. Carson found a photograph from 1913 showing Prince after his rescue. The face was gaunt, traumatized, but the eyes. Carson had seen those eyes recently on one of the figures in the procession. Josiah Prince was still alive, over 100 years later. Carson brought his findings to Hawkins. She studied the evidence, then made a decision that surprised him. "We are going in. Full tactical team, hazmat gear, the works. We find these people and we stop whatever they're doing." The operation was planned for dawn. 20 officers would enter through the main shaft, while another team watched the exits. They had maps of the mine from historical records, though everyone knew the tunnels could have been modified over the decades. Carson was part of the entry team. They descended into darkness, their lights revealing walls lined with that same copper wire, woven into complex patterns. The air was thick with that chemical smell, and their hazmat gear suddenly seemed inadequate. 100 feet down, they found the first chamber. It was carved from solid rock, the walls covered in those symbols. In the center was a pool of that dark fluid, and floating in it are those bodies. Someone asked. They were, dozens of them, suspended in the liquid, copper wire connecting them in a vast network. Some were clearly dead, mummified by the fluid. Others opened their eyes as the lights hit them. "Dear God," Hawkins whispered. They pressed deeper, finding more chambers, processing rooms where bodies were prepared, surgical equipment that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. And everywhere, that copper wire, growing like veins through the rock itself. In the deepest chamber they could reach, they found him, Josiah Prince, though he barely looked human anymore. His skin was the color of oxidized copper. Wire grew from his body into the walls themselves. He was connected to everything, the center of the network. "You are too early," he said, his voice carrying despite the distance. "The transformation is not complete." "Josiah Prince," Hawkins called out, "you are under arrest for murder, kidnapping." And he laughed, and the sound echoed from every tunnel, every chamber. The bodies in the pools began to move, pulling themselves free from the fluid. "You do not understand," Prince said. The copper spoke to me in the darkness, showed me the truth. Flesh is temporary, but the earth is eternal. We are becoming eternal. The modified people began emerging from side tunnels, dozens of them, all with that jerky movement and copper wire fingers. The team formed a defensive circle, weapons raised. The transformation will continue, Prince said. Willing or not, you will all join us. The Copper Prince demands it. Open fire, Hawkins commanded. The gunfire was deafening in the enclosed space. The modified people jerked and twitched as bullets struck them, that dark fluid leaking from their wounds. But they did not fall. They kept coming, reaching with those copper wire fingers. Fall back to the main shaft. The team retreated. Fire and control burst to slow the advancing figures. Carson saw one officer go down, copper wires piercing through his hazmat suit. The man screamed, then went rigid as the wires spread under his skin. Leave him, Hawkins shouted. He is gone. They reached the main shaft, but the lift was not there. Someone had cut the cable from above. Emergency ladder. Martinez pointed to the rusted rungs bolted to the shaft wall. They started, climbing, the modified people following with inhuman persistence. Carson looked down and saw dozens of them moving up the walls like spiders, copper wires extending from their fingers to grip the rock. Halfway up, Travis, one of the urban explorers who made the initial call, was waiting at a side tunnel. But his eyes were now that familiar blank stare. You can't leave, he said in a monotone voice. The Copper Prince needs you. He lunged at Carson, who barely managed to dodge. Travis fell past him, down into the mass of climbing figures below. They absorbed him into their ranks without pause. Only 12 of the 20 officers made it to the surface. The entrance was immediately sealed with concrete and steel plating, but they could still hear the scratching from below. We need to evacuate the area, Hawkins said, blood running from a gash on her forehead. Create a perimeter at least 5 miles out. But even as they pulled back, reports came in. The modified people were emerging from other mine entrances some miles away. The tunnel system was more extensive than anyone had realized, connecting not just the mines around Helvetia, but reaching toward other ghost towns. The National Guard was called in. The official story was a chemical leak from old mining equipment. The real investigation went underground, literally and figuratively. A joint task force was created, bringing in experts from the CDC, the FBI, and even some agencies Carson had never heard of. Dr. Kim's analysis grew more disturbing with each test. The copper wire was not just wire. It was somehow organic, growing like a fungus through the victims' bodies. The dark fluid was replacing their blood, keeping tissues preserved while fundamentally changing their biology. They are not human anymore, she told Carson privately. They are something else. And based on the growth patterns, this transformation, it is not random. Someone or something is directing it. Carson was assigned to track the disappearances, creating a timeline. The pattern was clear. Every few years, the number of missing persons would spike, always centered on the ghost towns. But recently, the pattern had accelerated. What used to happen every 5 years was now happening monthly. 3 weeks after the initial incident, Carson was working late at the command post when his radio crackled. Movement at the Duquesne site. One of the guards stationed at another ghost town reported. Multiple figures emerging from the transmission cut to screams, then static. By the time reinforcements arrived, they found the guard post empty, blood on the ground, but no bodies. The town of Duquesne, 20 miles from Helvetia, was now showing the same blue-green lights. The situation was spiraling out of control. The governor declared a state of emergency. The affected zone was expanded to encompass 6 ghost towns. Residents of nearby communities were evacuated, but the modified people were adapting. They started appearing in populated areas. A family in Tubac reported their missing daughter returning home, but changed. Copper wires visible under her skin. Speaking in that same monotone about the Copper Prince, Carson interviewed the family before they were relocated. The daughter, Kendra, age 16, sat perfectly still during the questioning. "Where have you been?" Kendra Carson asked. "Below. Learning. Transforming." "Who took you?" "No one took me. I was called. We are all called eventually. The copper sings to us." "Who is the Copper Prince?" For the first time, Kendra's expression changed. A smile that did not reach her empty eyes. "He is not a who. He is a what. He is the future. Flesh fails, but copper endures. We are becoming something better." That night, Carson had his first dream. He was underground, surrounded by walls of copper that pulsed like a heartbeat. The metal was alive, growing, spreading through the rock. And at the center, something vast and impossible. Not Prince, but what Prince had become, or maybe always, was a consciousness distributed through miles of wire, hundreds of modified bodies, the entire underground network. He woke to find thin copper, wires growing from his pillow, reaching for his head. Carson reported the incident immediately. DR. Kim examined him, finding trace amounts of copper sulfate in his blood, levels that should not be there. "You have been exposed," she said. "Something in that mine. Maybe airborne, maybe through microabrasions. Your body is fighting it, but what?" "I have tested everyone who went into those tunnels," she said. "You all have elevated copper levels, and they are increasing. The task force tried everything. They pumped concrete into the tunnels only to find new openings appearing overnight. They tried poison gas, but the modified people did not need to breathe. They even discussed more extreme measures, fuel air explosives, tactical nuclear weapons. But the tunnel system was too vast, too close to populated areas. Then came the morning when everything changed. Carson woke to find the command post empty, except for Sheriff Hawkins, who was standing at the window staring at the desert. "They are gone," she said. "Everyone who went into the tunnels. Martinez, all of them, left in the night. To where? Where do you think?" Carson looked out the window. In the distance, the ghost towns were glowing with that blue-green light. But now it was not just isolated points. The glow was spreading, connecting, forming a network across the desert. "It is starting," Hawkins said. "The real transformation. Not just people. Everything. The land itself." She turned to Carson, and he saw thin copper, wires growing from the corners of her eyes. "I can hear him," she whispered. "Prince, or what he has become. He is in my head, showing me things. The future. It is beautiful and terrible. Sheriff, we need to get you to medical." "No." She drew her service weapon. "I won't become one of them. I won't be used to hurt people. Run, Carson. Get as far from here as you can. Tell them to nuke the whole area if they have to. Do not let it spread." The gunshot echoed across the desert. Carson ran. He drove north as fast as he could, but he could feel it, the copper in his blood, calling him back. Every mile was agony, fighting against the pull. He made it to Phoenix before collapsing. When he woke in the hospital, officials in hazmat suits were questioning him. He told them everything, showed them the thin copper wires that were now growing from his fingernails. They isolated him, studied him, tried to find a cure. But there was no cure. The transformation could be slowed, but not stopped. The official response was swift and brutal. The entire region was quarantined. The military moved in with flamethrowers and white phosphorus, burning everything. They claimed it worked, that the threat was contained. But Carson knew better. In his isolation room, he could feel them, the network, the modified people, Prince's distributed consciousness. They were not gone. They had just gone deeper, spreading through underground aquifers, following veins of copper or that stretched across the continent. Sometimes late at night, Carson heard the singing, not with his ears, but in his bones, in the copper that was slowly replacing his blood. Asterisk, the Prince rises. The Prince calls. Copper Kingdom, Copper Thralls. Asterisk. They did not listen. Or maybe they did, but it was already too late. Carson's last journal entry, found after his room was discovered empty, The windows sealed from the inside. Thin copper wires growing from the walls. Asterisk, I understand now. Prince did not find something in that mine. Something found him. Something that has been waiting in the earth since before humans walked upright. We thought we were mining copper. But maybe the copper was mining us. I can feel myself changing. My thoughts are not entirely my own anymore. Sometimes I see through other eyes. Hundreds of them, all connected, all part of the same vast organism. We are becoming something new. Not human, not machine, but something in between. They will try to stop it. They will fail. You can't fight geology. You can't kill what is part of the earth itself. The transformation is not an invasion. It is an evolution. And evolution does not ask for permission. I am going below now. The others are calling. We have work to do. The Copper Prince has such wonders to show us. Such terrible wonders. If you find this, do not come looking for me. I am not Carson Wells anymore. I am part of something larger, older, hungrier. The earth is patient. The earth endures. And now, so do we. Welcome to the Copper Kingdom. Population growing. Asterisk. The room where Carson had been held is still sealed. Sometimes maintenance workers report hearing singing from inside. The walls have been x-rayed, revealing an intricate network of copper wire growing to the concrete, spreading inch by inch, year by year. The official report lists Carson Wells as deceased, one of 37 casualties of a chemical leak at an abandoned mine. The ghost towns of southern Arizona remain off limits, surrounded by chain-link fence and warning signs. But sometimes hikers in the remote desert report strange sights, figures that move with jerky motions, lights in abandoned places, and always a singing that seemed to come from the earth itself. The first call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in September. Deputy Evan Thorne was patrolling the remote highways of Cochise County when dispatch crackled through his radio. Unit 23. We have a reported disturbance at the Blackwood Ranch, Highway 80, mile marker 47. Neighbor reports gunshots and screaming. Evan knew the Blackwood Ranch. 1,500 acres of scrub desert and cattle land owned by the Vance family for 3 generations. Remote did not begin to describe it. The nearest neighbor was 6 miles away. The town of Bisbee, a full 40-minute drive. Unit 23 responding, Evan said, turning his patrol car around. ETA 20 minutes. Be advised, caller says multiple shots fired. Backup is en route, but they're 40 minutes out. Evan pressed harder on the accelerator. The desert highway was empty, his headlights cutting through the darkness. The Blackwood Ranch had always been a source of trouble. Family disputes, property line arguments, water rights battles. Marcus Vance, the current patriarch, was known for his temper and his gun collection. The ranch entrance was marked by a rusted metal arch with Blackwood spelled out in welded letters. Evan's headlights swept across the dirt road, leading to the main house, illuminating fresh tire tracks. Multiple vehicles had been here recently. He stopped his patrol car 100 yards from the house, grabbing his radio. Dispatch, I am on scene. Main house is dark. No visible activity. 3 vehicles in the driveway. Marcus Vance's truck. Looks like his son Liam's Jeep, and a sedan I do not recognize. Roger that, Unit 23. Backup is still 30 minutes out. Evan drew his weapon and approached on foot. The desert silence was absolute. No insects, no wind, nothing. Then he smelled it. Gunpowder and something else. Blood. The front door of the ranch house was open, hanging off one hinge. Evan's flashlight revealed bullet holes in the door frame, spent casings on the porch. Sheriff's Department. He called. Anyone inside? No response. Evan entered, weapon raised. The living room was destroyed. Furniture overturned. Family photos shattered on the floor. Blood splattered on the walls. But no bodies. He cleared the room and moved deeper into the house. The kitchen showed signs of a struggle. Broken dishes, a knife stuck in the wall, more blood. The blood trail led toward the back of the house. In the hallway, Evan found the first body. Marcus Vance, 63, patriarch of the Blackwood Ranch. He had been shot multiple times, his hunting rifle still clutched in his hands. Defensive wounds on his arms suggested he would fought back. Evan checked for a pulse, knowing he would not find one. Marcus had been dead for at least an hour. He continued following the blood trail to the master bedroom. Marcus's wife, Linda, 59, was on the floor beside the bed. Single gunshot to the head, execution style. The wall safe behind a painting was open and empty. Dispatch: I have 2 deceased at the Blackwood Ranch, Marcus and Linda Vance. Multiple gunshots. Possible robbery gone wrong. Copy that, Unit 23. Backup is 20 minutes out. Evan heard something. A whimper, barely audible. He followed the sound to a closet. Inside, crammed behind hanging clothes, was a teenage girl. Olivia Vance, Marcus's 14-year-old granddaughter. She was covered in blood, eyes wide with terror, a kitchen knife clutched in her hands. Olivia, it is Deputy Thorne. You are safe now. She did not respond, just stared at him with those terrified eyes. Olivia, are you hurt? She shook her head slightly. Is anyone else in the house? She nodded, then pointed up. The attic. Evan helped Olivia out of the closet, noting that the blood on her did not seem to be hers. Stay here. Do not move. He found the attic access in the hallway ceiling. The pull-down ladder was already extended. Evan climbed carefully, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. The attic was a finished space used for storage. Behind a stack of boxes, he found 2 more bodies. Liam Vance, Marcus's 35-year-old son, and his wife, Brooke, 32, both shot multiple times. Liam had a pistol in his hand, empty, but there was something else, written on the wall in what looked like blood. They knew. Evan photographed everything, then climbed back down. Olivia was where he would left her, still clutching the knife. Olivia, I need you to talk to me. Who did this? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Shock, probably. Was it someone you know? She nodded. Family. Another nod, more emphatic. Evan's blood ran cold. Who else is supposed to be here tonight? Olivia held up 3 fingers. 3 more people. She nodded, then pointed toward the back of the property. Evan knew who she meant. Marcus's other son, Caleb, lived in a trailer on the far side of the ranch with his girlfriend, Crystal, and her son from a previous relationship, a troubled kid named Leo. Are they the ones who did this? Olivia's nod was barely perceptible. Dispatch. I need that backup now. Possible suspect still on property. Armed and dangerous. Copy that. Unit 23. Units are 10 minutes out. 10 minutes was too long. Evan made a decision. Olivia, I need you to hide. Lock yourself in the bathroom and do not come out until I or another deputy tells you it is safe. Understand. She nodded and scurried to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Evan exited through the back door, moving carefully across the property. The trailer was about 300 yards away, lights on, music playing. As he approached, he could hear voices arguing. Said there was more, a woman's voice. Crystal. There is more, but it is in the damn bank. Caleb's voice slurred. Drunk or high? Maybe both. Then we are screwed. We killed them for nothing. Shut up, let me think. Evan called for backup to go silent, then positioned himself behind Caleb's truck. Through the trailer window, he could see 3 figures moving around inside, Caleb, Crystal, and Leo. Then he saw something that made his stomach turn. On the table inside the trailer were bags of what looked like methamphetamine, scales, and packaging materials. This was not just about family money. The Vances had discovered Caleb's drug operation. A door slammed. Leo, the teenager, had stepped outside, lighting a cigarette. He had a pistol tucked in his waistband. Evan had to act. Sheriff's Department. Hands where I can see them. Leo spun, reaching for the gun. Do not do it. Hands up. The kid was fast. The pistol was halfway out when Evan fired. Leo went down, clutching his shoulder, the gun falling from his hand. The trailer door burst open. Caleb came out shooting, a semi-automatic rifle spraying bullets. Evan dug behind the truck as windows shattered above him. "You killed your family." "Caleb," Evan shouted. "It is over. They were going to destroy everything." Caleb screamed back. "Turn me in, take the ranch." They chose the land over their own blood. More gunfire. Evan could hear sirens in the distance. Backup finally arriving. Crystal appeared at the trailer window with a shotgun. Evan barely got behind cover before she fired, pellets peppering the truck. "Give it up," Evan called. "You are surrounded. Go to hell." But the sirens were getting closer. Caleb and Crystal must have heard them too. There was a sudden silence from the trailer. "Caleb, Crystal, come out with your hands up." Nothing. Then 2 gunshots from inside the trailer. A pause. Then a third. Evan waited until backup arrived. For units, lights blazing. They approached the trailer in formation. Evan entered first, weapon raised. Caleb and Crystal were on the floor, both with gunshot wounds to the head. Murder-suicide, it looked like. Caleb still had the rifle in his hand. But something was wrong. The angles were off. The blood spatter did not match a self-inflicted wound. "Check on the kid," Evan told another deputy. Leo was gone. A blood trail led from where he would fallen toward the desert. They would lost him in the darkness. Back at the main house, Olivia was safe, but still unable to speak. The crime scene investigators arrived along with Sheriff Carl Rodriguez. The scene was processed through the night and into the next day. The official story came together. Caleb Vance had been running a meth operation from his trailer on the family ranch. When his father, Marcus, discovered it, he threatened to turn Caleb in and cut him out of the will. Caleb, along with Crystal and Leo, had come to the main house to convince Marcus otherwise. When that failed, violence erupted. But Evan could not shake the feeling that something was off. The blood message they knew did not fit, and Olivia's behavior suggested she would see something more. 3 days later, Evan was reviewing the evidence when he noticed something in the crime scene photos. In the attic, partially hidden behind Liam's body, was a cell phone. It had been recording. The video was dark, shaky, but the audio was clear. Liam and Brooke had hidden in the attic when the shooting started. They would call 911, but the remote location meant help was too far away. On the recording, Evan could hear Marcus arguing with someone downstairs, but it was not Caleb's voice. It was younger. "You do not understand," Leo was saying. "This family owes us. My mom and Caleb. They deserve their share. Get out of my house." Marcus's voice firm but controlled. "Not without what we came for." I said, "Get out." Then gunshots. Linda's scream. More shots. Caleb's voice. Then Leo. "What the hell did you do? What you were too chicken to do yourself." The recording continued. Liam whispering to Brooke, telling her to stay quiet. Footsteps on the stairs. The attic ladder creaking. Leo's voice. "Found you." "Leo, stop. Think about what you're doing." "I am thinking." No witnesses. The gunshots were deafening on the recording. Then Leo's voice again, calm, emotionless. "Caleb, Crystal, get up here. Help me stage this. We need to get out of here." Caleb's voice panicked. "No, we make it look like you two did it, then killed yourselves. I was never here." "Crystal, that is insane. You want to go to prison, because that is what happens if we do not control the narrative." The recording cut out there, the phone's memory full. Evan immediately called Sheriff Rodriguez. They had evidence that Leo was the primary shooter, that Caleb and Crystal were likely murdered to cover it up. An APB was issued for Leo Foster, 17 years old, armed, and extremely dangerous. But Leo had vanished. His blood trail led into the desert, but search teams with dogs lost the scent after a mile. It was like he would have evaporated. Evan interviewed Olivia again, this time with a child psychologist present. Slowly, through drawings and written words, she told her story. Leo had always been strange. He would kill animals on the ranch, threatened her if she told anyone. Caleb and Crystal were too high most of the time to notice or care. The night of the murders, Leo had come to the main house alone first. Olivia had hidden when she heard him arguing with her grandfather. The shooting started in the living room. Marcus fought back, but Leo was prepared. Linda tried to run, but did not make it. Liam and Brooke hid in the attic, but Leo found them. Caleb and Crystal arrived after it was already over, horrified at what Leo had done. Olivia had watched from her hiding spot as Leo forced Caleb to help move the bodies to stage the scene. Then, in the trailer, Leo shot them both and tried to make it look like a murder-suicide, but Evan had arrived before he could finish staging the scene. The manhunt for Leo intensified. His photo was on every news channel, every social media platform. Tips came in from across the Southwest, but none panned out. 2 weeks later, a rancher near the Mexican border reported someone stealing supplies from his barn. The description matched Leo. Border Patrol was alerted, but by the time they responded, he was gone. Then the letters started arriving. The first one came to the sheriff's office, addressed to Evan. Astor's Deputy Thorne, you think you know what happened at the Blackwood Ranch. You do not. That family was poisoned. Marcus Vance was a monster who beat his wife and kids. Liam was a coward who let it happen. Caleb was weak. Crystal was greedy. They all deserved what they got. Olivia knows the truth. Ask her about the bruises. Ask her about the locked doors. Ask her about what her grandfather really did in that house. I am not a killer. I am justice. El Asteris. Evan investigated the allegations. There were no records of abuse, no reports to CPS. But when he pressed, neighbors admitted they had heard things, seen bruises on Linda. Notice how the kids flinched when Marcus raised his voice. Olivia, through her therapist, gradually revealed more. Marcus had been abusive, controlling. The ranch was a prison. Caleb's drug dealing was his escape. Liam tried to protect everyone, but could not stand up to his father. But that did not justify murder. Evan continued tracking Leo, following leads that took him across Arizona and into New Mexico, always a step behind. 3 months after the murders, another letter arrived. Asterisk Deputy, you are still looking in the wrong places. I am not running. I am hunting. There are other families like the Vances, other ranches where terrible things happen behind closed doors. The law does not help. CPS does not help. Someone has to. Check the news in Luna County, New Mexico. The Morrison Ranch. Tell me they did not deserve it. El Asteris. Evan checked the Morrison Ranch. A father and 2 sons dead, shot in their home. The wife and daughter survived. Told police that a young man had saved them from years of abuse. The killer was never caught. The pattern continued. Every few months, another remote ranch, another family with a history of hidden abuse, another massacre where the abusers died and the victims survived. The killer was always described the same way. Young, calm, methodical, Leo had become something else. Not just a murderer, but a self-appointed executioner, traveling the Southwest, targeting families he deemed deserving of death. A year after Blackwood Ranch massacre, Evan got a call from a number he did not recognize. Deputy Thorne. Evan recognized the voice immediately. Leo, I wanted you to know I never meant for Caleb and Crystal to die. That was messy. I have gotten better since then. Turn yourself in, Leo. This has to stop. Does it? How many kids are being beaten right now while we are talking? How many wives are hiding bruises? The system does not work, Deputy. I am the system now. You are a killer. I am a survivor. And I am making sure others survive, too. You know Sheriff Rodriguez beats his wife. Evan's blood ran cold. Check her medical records. 3 falls in the last year. Broken ribs, concussion, fractured wrist. Ask yourself, Deputy, if it was true, what would you do? Report who would believe you, or would you handle it yourself? The line went dead. Evan did check. Rodriguez's wife, Maria, to have those injuries. The explanations were plausible, but the pattern. He confronted Rodriguez privately, carefully. The sheriff's reaction. Instant rage, threats, told Evan everything he needed to know. But Leo was right. Who would believe a deputy over a sheriff? 2 nights later, Sheriff Rodriguez was found dead in his home. Single gunshot to the head, made to look like suicide. A note confessing to years of abuse. Maria Rodriguez was found locked in a bedroom, beaten but alive. Evan knew it was Leo, but Maria would not cooperate. She insisted it was suicide. Evan became obsessed with catching Leo, but part of him, a part he hated, understood. The system was broken. The remote ranches of the Southwest were kingdoms where patriarchs ruled with impunity. Evan tracked him for 3 years. Always close, never close enough. He studied the patterns, tried to predict the next target. But Leo was smart, random in his timing, if not his selection. Then, Olivia Vance contacted Evan. Now 17, she had found her voice through years of therapy. He called me, she said. Leo, he wanted to know if I was okay. He said he was sorry about my parents, but not about my grandfather. He said he is tired. He wants to stop, but does not know how. Did he say where he was? No, but he mentioned the Salvation Mountains. Something about finding peace in the Painted Desert. Salvation Mountain, an art installation in the California desert near the Salton Sea. Evan drove there alone, off duty, carrying a letter Olivia had written for Leo. He found Leo living in an abandoned trailer near Slab City, the lawless community in the desert. He was 20 now, gaunt, scarred, nothing like the teenager who fled the Blackwood Ranch. Deputy Thorne, Leo said, no surprise in his voice. Took you long enough. It is over, Leo. Is it? There's a ranch in Imperial County. The father brands his kids, actually brands them like cattle. Tell me he does not deserve what is coming. That is not for you to decide. Then who? You, the system that let it happen. Evan handed him Olivia's letter. Leo read it, tears forming in his eyes. In it, Olivia forgave him for her parents' deaths, but begged him to stop, to find another way. She is the only pure thing left from that night, Leo said. I see their faces. You know, all of them, even the ones who deserved it. Then stop. Turn yourself in. Prison, death penalty. That is your solution. That is justice. No, Leo said, shaking his head. That is law. There is a difference. They sat in silence in the desert heat. Finally, Leo spoke again. I will make you a deal. I will disappear. Really disappear. No more killings. But you have to promise me something. What? Check on the families, the remote ranches, the places where no one's watching. Be the system I cannot trust. Evan wanted to arrest him, to bring him in, to close the case. But he thought about Sheriff Rodriguez, about all the hidden abuse Leo had uncovered about Olivia's letter. I can't let you go. You can't stop me either. I have got a rifle trained on you right now. Motion sensor trigger. You move toward me, we both die. Evan looked around, spotted the setup ingenious, paranoid, effective. This is the only deal you get, deputy. I disappear, the killings stop, but you become what the system should be. Or I keep going and more people die. Your choice. Evan made his choice. He stood up, turned his back, and walked away. Leo Foster vanished that day. No more ranch massacres. No more vigilante executions. Evan kept his promise, investigating abuse reports, checking on remote families, being the oversight the system lacked. But sometimes Evan wondered if Leo had really stopped. When an abusive rancher died in a suspicious accident, when a wife beater disappeared in the desert, when a child molester was found dead in his cell. Was it coincidence? Or was Leo still out there, more careful, more selective, but still executing his version of justice? Evan never found out. He never looked too hard. Some ghosts are better left undisturbed. The Blackwood Ranch still stands empty, a monument to the night, when family secrets and vigilante justice collided in blood. Olivia Vance now lives with relatives in California, studying to become a therapist, helping other survivors of family violence. She still has nightmares about that night, but sometimes she admits she dreams about Leo, too. Not the killer he became, but the broken boy who thought he was saving her. She wonders if, in his own twisted way, maybe he did. Deputy Tiffany Walsh had been with the Cochise County Sheriff's Office for 8 years. All of them spent patrolling the harsh borderlands where Arizona meets Mexico. She would seen her share of trafficking, both drugs and human, but nothing had prepared her for what she would find in Skeleton Canyon on that moonless October night. The call came in at 2:15 a.m. from a Border Patrol checkpoint 20 miles east of Douglas. The voice on the radio was Jackson Torres, a veteran agent she would worked with dozens of times before. But tonight, his usually steady voice carried an edge of panic. Sheriff's Department, we need backup at Skeleton Canyon. Our sensors picked up a large group crossing, maybe 30 individuals. We pursue, but something's wrong. Define wrong, Tiffany responded, already turning her patrol vehicle toward the canyon, the speedometer climbing past 70 on the empty desert highway. We found their guide, what is left of him. And, Deputy, there is something else. The people we are tracking, they are not moving like normal crossers. They are too organized, too fast. And the sounds they are making, the transmission cut to static. Tiffany tried to raise Jackson again, but got no response. She pushed the accelerator harder, her patrol car's engine roaring through the night. Skeleton Canyon had earned its name honestly. In the 1880s, it had been the site of numerous massacres Mexican smugglers ambushed by American bandits, leaving bones scattered across the canyon floor. The place had been cursed in local legend ever since. Even now, over a century later, hikers occasionally found human remains bleached white by the desert sun. The cartels usually avoided it, preferring easier routes despite the canyon's strategic advantages. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and the recent crackdown on traditional smuggling routes had pushed operations into places even the criminals feared. 20 minutes later, Tiffany arrived at the canyon entrance. 3 Border Patrol vehicles sat abandoned, engines still running, doors open. Jackson's truck was among them. Her hand moved instinctively to her sidearm as she called it in. Dispatch, I am at Skeleton Canyon. 3 Border Patrol units abandoned. No sign of agents. Requesting immediate backup. Copy that, Unit 14. Backup is 40 minutes out. 40 minutes. Too long. Jackson and his team could be dying in there. Tiffany grabbed her tactical gear vest, rifle, extra magazines, first aid kit, and her grandfather's knife. A wicked 8-inch blade he would carried in Vietnam. She would never had to use it on duty, but something about tonight made her clip it to her belt. The beam of her tactical flashlight cut through the darkness as she entered the canyon. The first thing she noticed was the silence. The Sonoran Desert was never truly quiet. There were always insects and night birds, the rustle of small mammals. But here, nothing. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. 50 yards in, she found the first blood. A spray pattern on the canyon wall, too high to be from a normal wound. Arterial spray, but from someone who'd been lifted off the ground when it happened. Her light followed the blood trail down to a dark pool in the sand. No body. Jackson, she called out, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. Torres, you out here? A sound answered her. Not a voice, but something between a laugh and a sob, coming from deeper in the canyon. She followed it, weapon raised, every nerve on edge. The canyon narrowed, walls rising 30 feet on either side. Ancient petroglyphs covered the rock face here, symbols from long-dead peoples who'd inhabited this land before European contact. But among the old symbols were new ones, carved recently. They hurt to look at geometric patterns that seemed to move in her peripheral vision. Another 100 yards, and she found the guide. He had been torn apart, literally. Arms ripped from sockets, chest cavity opened, organs missing. But the wounds were not from animals. The tears were too precise, too deliberate. His face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Around his body, arranged in a perfect circle, were his removed organs: heart, liver, kidneys, all placed with ritualistic precision. But that was not the worst part. Carved into his chest in letters that still wept blood was a message. The door opens. Tiffany photographed everything, then noticed the tracks. Dozens of footprints, all bare feet. But they were wrong. Too deep, like each person weighed twice what they should. And the gait pattern was inhuman. The space between steps too long. Some of the prints showed what looked like claws instead of toes. A scream echoed through the canyon human, agonized, cut short. It came from the direction of the old copper mines that riddled the canyon's deeper sections. Tiffany ran toward it, all thoughts of waiting for backup forgotten. She found Jackson Torres outside a mine entrance, or what was left of him. He was still alive, barely propped against a rock. His tactical gear was shredded, for parallel gashes across his chest looked like claw marks. His eyes found hers, wide with terror and something else, knowledge of something too horrible to process. Tiffany, he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Do not go in there. They are not human anymore. Who? The Crossers. Changed, all changed. The coyote, Carlos. He made a deal, fed them something. They are, he coughed, spraying blood. They are becoming something else. And there is something in the mine. Ancient, hungry. It has been waiting. Jackson, stay with me. Help's coming. He grabbed her arm with surprising strength. No, you have to stop them. They are heading for Douglas. 30 of them, maybe more, if they reach the town. His grip loosened, eyes losing focus. The children. It wants the children. Jackson Torres died with a rattling breath that seemed to echo through the canyon. Tiffany closed his eyes, then stood, checking her ammunition. 6 magazines for the rifle, 3 for her Glock. Against 30 of whatever had killed Jackson, it would not be enough. But she could not wait for backup. Not if they were heading for Douglas, a town of 15,000 people. She entered the mine. The tunnel was older than any mining operation should have created. The walls were too smooth, carved rather than blasted. Her light revealed more of those moving symbols and words in Spanish, English, and languages she did not recognize. But one phrase appeared over and over. Feed the sleeper. Deeper in, she heard singing. Multiple voices in perfect harmony. The melody unlike anything she had heard before. It was beautiful and terrible, making her teeth ache and her vision blur. She followed it through a maze of tunnels that should not exist, passages that seemed to double back on themselves, yet always led deeper. Then she entered a vast chamber and stopped dead. 30 people, maybe more, stood in a circle, all in the filthy clothes typical of border crossers. Men, women, children, all perfectly still, singing that impossible song. But they were not human anymore. Their bodies had been changed. Elongated limbs, fingers that ended in black claws, mouths that opened too wide. Their eyes reflected her flashlight like a cat's, but the color was wrong, deep red, like fresh blood. In the center of the circle was Carlos El Coyote Mendoza, one of the most successful human traffickers in the Sonoran Desert. But something was catastrophically wrong with him. His body had been transformed into something massive, at least 8 feet tall, muscles rippling under skin that looked more like leather than flesh. Extra arms that sprouted from his torso, 6 in total, each ending in hands that were too long, too slender. His face was the worst part, still recognizably human, but stretched, distorted, with a mouth that split his head nearly in half. And behind him, painted on the chamber wall, in what looked like fresh blood, was a massive symbol that made Tiffany's eyes water to look at. It seemed to pulse with its own light, and she realized with growing horror that it was moving, rotating slowly like a doorknob turning. Another one comes, Carlos said, his voice a harmony of tones that should not come from a single throat. Good. The sleeper needs more. Always more. The circle of transformed people turned to face her, moving in perfect synchronization. Up close, she could see the details of their transformation. Bone spurs erupted from their spines. Their skin had a scaled texture. Some had developed what looked like gills on their necks. All of them smiled with too many teeth. Deputy Walsh. Carlos continued, taking a step that covered 10 feet. I know you. You arrested my cousin last year. He died in your jail. He hung himself. Carlos. He was looking at 20 years. No matter. He serves the sleeper now. As you will. He gestured to the symbol on the wall. Do you know what this place is? Why this canyon has always been soaked in blood? Tiffany kept her rifle raised, though she knew it was useless. Enlighten me. It is a wound. A place where our world touches another. The conquistadors knew it. The Apache knew it. They fed it blood to keep it closed. But the blood also feeds what is on the other side. And I have been feeding it so much these past months. Every crosser who did not make it, every rival gang member, every Border Patrol agent who got too close. All food for the sleeper. You are insane. Am I? Carlos laughed, a sound like grinding stone. I was dying, deputy. Cancer, eating me from the inside. The doctors gave me 3 months. But then I found the old books in a dead smuggler's pack. Instructions, rituals, promises of power and immortality. All I had to do was open the door. The symbol on the wall pulsed brighter. Through it, Tiffany could see something of vast darkness that moved, that breathed, that watched with an intelligence older than human civilization. It spoke to me. Carlos continued, showed me what I could become, what we all could become. The next evolution. No more weak flesh, no more death, just endless hunger and endless feeding. These people did not choose this, Tiffany said, indicating the transformed crossers. You forced it on them. They paid for passage to a new life. I gave them exactly that. He smiled, his mouth opening impossibly wide. Just not the life they expected. One of the transformed, a woman who might have been 30 or 60, it was impossible to tell now, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through broken glass. The change is ecstasy. We are free from fear, from pain, from human weakness. We are becoming divine. You are becoming monsters. Monster. Divine! These are human words for things beyond human understanding. The woman's head tilted at an impossible angle. The sleeper dreams of a world remade, where the strong consume the weak, where flesh is clay to be reshaped, where the border between life and death dissolves. More of them began to speak, each voice adding to a horrible chorus. We are the first. The door opens wider with each feeding. Soon the sleeper will wake fully, and when it does, this world will drown in beautiful darkness. Tiffany backed toward the tunnel entrance, but found it blocked. More transformed people had entered behind her. She recognized some of them, Border Patrol agents who'd gone missing over the past months, their uniforms hanging in tatters from their changed bodies. Among them was Maria Santos, an agent she would known for 5 years. Maria's face was still recognizable, but her body had been elongated, stretched like taffy, arms reaching nearly to the ground. Tiffany, Maria said, her voice still carrying a trace of her former self. Do not fight it. The change. It is freedom. No more watching people die in the desert. No more choosing between law and compassion. Just purpose. Pure, simple purpose. What purpose? To feed, to grow, to spread. Maria's 2 long arms reached toward her. Let us show you. Tiffany fired 3 rounds into Maria's center mass. The transformed agent jerked, but did not fall. Black ichor leaked from the wounds, but they began closing almost immediately. Bullets, Carlos laughed, still thinking like a human. The circle began to close. Tiffany switched to full auto, spraying the crowd. They jerked and danced as bullets tore through them, but none fell. The black fluid that leaked from their wounds seemed to move with purpose, crawling back into their bodies. Her rifle clicked empty. She drew her Glock, knowing it was useless. The transformed people were almost on her when she remembered her grandfather's knife. On instinct, she drew it and slashed at the nearest attacker. The blade connected with the transformed man's reaching arm. Where it cut, the flesh did not just part. It burned. The man shrieked, pulling back, smoke rising from the wound. The others hesitated. Tiffany looked at the knife. It was nothing special, just military surplus steel, but had been blessed by her grandmother, a devout Catholic who'd insisted on having Father Martinez bless all of her grandfather's war souvenirs when he would return from Vietnam. A blessed blade, Carlos hissed. Old magic. But one knife won't save you. He was right, but it might buy her time. Tiffany slashed at the air, keeping the transformed at bay as she backed toward a side tunnel she would noticed earlier. They followed but maintained their distance, respect for the blade evident in their inhuman eyes. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to come at her one or two at a time. She kept the knife moving, occasionally connecting with reaching claws or grasping hands. Each cut brought shrieks of pain and the smell of burning flesh. But she was being herded. She realized it too late. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, but somehow worse. The walls were covered in cocoons made of that black ichor, each one containing a human form in various stages of transformation. Some were still recognizably human, beating against their prisons. Others had changed so much they looked more like enormous insects or deep-sea creatures. At the center of the room was a pool of black liquid bubbling despite no visible heat source. And rising from it was something that should not exist, a creature that was part human, part insect, part machine. Its body was segmented like a centipede's, but each segment had human arms and faces embedded in it, dozens of faces, all screaming silently. Beautiful, is not it? Carlos said from behind her. My first success. 23 people merged into one glorious organism. It will be the sleeper's herald when the door fully opens. The thing in the pool turned toward Tiffany. All its faces focused on her, and when it spoke, it was with 23 voices in perfect unison. Join us. Become us. Feed the sleeper. Go to hell. Hell, Carlos laughed. This is hell, deputy. And heaven. And everything in between. The sleeper's realm has no human concepts of punishment or reward, only hunger and the feeding thereof. The creature began pulling itself in the pool, its movement obscene, segments rippling, human arms pulling it forward while others reached toward her. Tiffany slashed with the knife, severing several arms, but more kept coming. She ran deeper into the caves, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind her. Then she found the heart of it all. The chamber was vast, so large her flashlight could not find the far walls. In the center was a pit that seemed to go down forever, and from it rose a presence that her mind could not fully process. Ancient, vast, hungry beyond measure. The sleeper. Around the pit, arranged in concentric circles, were hundreds of bodies. Some were ancient mummified, remains in Spanish armor, Native American garb, Old West clothing. Others were fresh. All were connected by veins of that black ichor, creating a vast network with the pit at its center. Standing at the edge of the pit was a figure Tiffany recognized from missing person reports. DR. Elena Vasquez, a biochemist who'd vanished from the University of Arizona 6 months ago, but she had been transformed more thoroughly than the others. Her body was now translucent, showing internal organs that pulsed with black fluid. Her head split open like a flower, revealing a brain that had grown far beyond human proportions. Deputy Walsh, DR. Vasquez said, her voice coming from no visible mouth. How wonderful. An observer for the final phase. Final phase of what? The opening, of course. Carlos was just a tool, a crude instrument to gather the necessary biomass. But I understand the science. The sleeper is not from another dimension or some hell. It is from outside our universe entirely. A place where the laws of physics are suggestions, where flesh and energy and thought are all the same substance. The pit began to glow with that impossible light Tiffany had seen through the symbol. Something was rising from its depths. 30 more minutes. DR. Vasquez continued. That is all we need. The transformation of the initial subjects is complete. They will spread through Douglas first, changing everyone they encounter. Within a week, all of southern Arizona. Within a month, the continent. The sleeper's influence will spread through every living thing, remaking your world into something better. Better, you are talking about the end of humanity. The end of humanity as you know it. But imagine, Deputy, no more death, no more disease, no more conflict between nations. All consciousness merged into one glorious whole, serving a single purpose: slavery. Freedom. Freedom from choice, from doubt, from the burden of individuality. Tiffany heard them coming, Carlos and the transformed, surrounding the chamber. She was trapped, but as she looked around, she noticed something. The ancient bodies in the circles, the ones in armor and old clothing. They all had weapons, swords, muskets, rifles from different eras. And many of those weapons showed signs of the same blessing her knife carried. Crosses etched into metal, holy symbols, Latin inscriptions. Others had fought this thing before. She ran to the nearest body, a conquistador whose armor was remarkably preserved. His sword was still in its sheath, the blade inscribed with prayers in Spanish. When she drew it, it felt warm in her hand, almost alive. Blessed weapons, DR. Vasquez observed. Yes, they have always been somewhat effective against the transformed flesh. But you can't stop what is coming with medieval superstition. Maybe not, Tiffany said, but I can try. She ran along the circle, gathering weapons, a Colt peacemaker with a cross carved in the grip, an Apache tomahawk with sacred symbols, a World War I bayonet with Hebrew inscriptions, each one thrummed with power. Carlos and the others entered the chamber, surrounding her. The merged creature dragged itself from another entrance. They were closing in from all sides. Kill her, DR. Vasquez commanded. Feed her to the sleeper. They charged. Tiffany fought like her grandfather had described fighting in the tunnels of Siu Chi. Brutal, desperate, without thought for anything but the next second of survival. The blessed sword cut through transformed flesh like paper. The peacemaker's prayer-inscribed bullets actually dropped attackers. But there were too many. And from the pit, something was definitely rising now. Tentacles of impossible size, covered in eyes and mouths, reaching for the chamber's ceiling. That is when she heard the helicopters. The ceiling exploded. Rappel lines dropped. Soldiers in full hazmat gear descended. Firing weapons, she did not recognize things that shot beams of white light that turned the transformed to ash. Deputy Walsh, a voice called through a speaker. Colonel Mitchell, U.S. Army. We are here to extract you. The pit, she screamed. Something's coming out of the pit. The colonel saw it. The massive tentacles, now fully emerged, each one the size of a subway car. Lighted up, he commanded. The soldiers opened fire with everything they had. The tentacles writhed, some retreating, but more kept coming. We need bigger guns, the colonel said, then into his radio. Broken arrow, authorization code Zulu 77. Skeleton Canyon, danger close. All units evacuate immediately. You're going to nuke it? Tiffany asked as a soldier clipped her to a rappel line. Tactical strike, Mitchell said. We have been monitoring this site for years. Hoped it would never come to this. They were hauled up through the blasted ceiling into a helicopter that immediately banked hard and accelerated away. Through the window, Tiffany watched more helicopters lifting off, all fleeing at maximum speed. 2 minutes to impact, the pilot announced. Below, she could see the transformed pouring out of mine entrances, running with inhuman speed toward Douglas. But also rising from the canyon was something vast. The sleeper itself, pulling its impossible bulk from the pit, a thing of tentacles and eyes and mouths that hurt to perceive directly. Then the missile hit. The explosion was smaller than she expected, but the effect on the creature was immediate. It writhed, screamed with a sound that shattered the helicopter's windows, then began to dissolve, pulled back into the collapsing pit. The canyon itself was caving in, burying the fleeing transformed under millions of tons of rock. "Did we get it?" Tiffany asked. Colonel Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "We stopped it from fully emerging. But things like the sleeper, they do not die. They just go back to sleep. And there are others. Others. Every border on Earth, Deputy. Every place where blood has been spilled for generations, where suffering has soaked into the ground. The sleepers feed on conflict, on human misery. And we have given them so much to feed on over the centuries." They landed at an underground military base Tiffany did not recognize. She was led to a medical facility where doctors in hazmat suits examined her, took blood samples, ran tests she did not understand. "You have been exposed," one doctor told her. "The ichor, the transformed blood. It is in your system. Not enough to change you, but enough that you will never be quite the same." What does that mean? You will see things others do not. Sense when the boundaries are weak. You will know when another sleeper is stirring. She was debriefed for days, shown satellite footage of other sites around the world. The Korean DMZ, the India-Pakistan border, the Gaza Strip, all showing similar energy signatures to what had been in Skeleton Canyon. "We need people like you," Colonel Mitchell told her. "People who have been exposed but retain their humanity. You can sense them, fight them in ways normal humans can't. You want me to join some kind of secret government monster hunting unit? Nothing so dramatic. Officially, you will still be a sheriff's deputy. But when we detect activity, when another sleeper starts to wake, we will call you." That was 3 years ago. Since then, Tiffany had responded to 7 incidents. A cult in New Mexico trying to wake something under the Trinity test site. Cartel tunnels in Texas that had broken through into older, darker passages. Each time, they would manage to stop the awakening, though never without casualties. Each time, the incidents were getting worse, the sleepers stirring more frequently. The official stories never mentioned the truth. Gas leaks, chemical spills, cartel violence. Comfortable lies for a population that could not handle the reality of what lurked beneath their feet. Tiffany still patrolled the Arizona borderlands, but now she knew what she was really guarding against. Not drug smugglers or illegal immigrants, but things far older and hungrier. Last week, she would receive new intelligence, unusual activity at multiple sites simultaneously. The sleepers were not just stirring individually anymore. They were communicating, coordinating, building toward something. Her phone rang. Colonel Mitchell's number. "Deputy Walsh, we have a situation. New Mexico border, Antelope Wells. Seismic activity suggesting a major emergence. How soon can you be there?" 90 minutes. "Good. And deputy, this one's different. We are detecting multiple emergence points. It might be the big one." Tiffany strapped on her weapons, loaded her gear into her patrol car. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the mountains blood red. Somewhere out there, under the earth, ancient things were stirring. Time to go to work. The radio crackled as she drove toward New Mexico. Reports were coming in from all over. Missing persons, strange lights, unexplained seismic activity. Not just at the border, but inland, too. Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque. The emergence points were spreading. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When she opened it, her blood ran cold. It was a photo of Carlos Mendoza, not dead in the collapsed canyon, as they were believed, but very much alive and even more transformed. His body had become something architectural, spreading across what looked like a massive underground chamber. And behind him, dozens of other transformed, all wearing the remnants of military uniforms. The text read, "Asterisk, you did not kill us, deputy. You freed us. The nuclear fire opened doors you can't imagine. We have been busy down here building, growing, preparing. Tonight, the sleeper truly wakes. And this time, no blessed blade will save you. Asterisk." Tiffany pressed harder on the accelerator. In her rear-view mirror, she could see lights rising from the desert floor. Not electric lights, but that impossible glow she would seen in the canyon. The emergence had begun. Her radio exploded with panicked reports. Douglas is gone. The whole town just changed. Something massive moving under Tucson. The streets are collapsing. Border Patrol Station 7 is not responding. Last transmission mentioned tentacles. Colonel Mitchell's voice cut. All units. This is not a drill. Multiple sleeper emergence confirmed. Evacuate civilian populations where possible. Weapons free. May God help us all. Tiffany reached for her grandfather's knife, feeling its blessed weight. Through her windshield, she could see the horizon rippling like water. Reality itself was becoming unstable. The final war had not started with bombs or invasions. It had started with human cruelty, feeding things that should have stayed sleeping. And now the bill had come due. But Tiffany Walsh would meet it head-on, blessed blade in hand, standing at the border between worlds, because that is what deputies did. They held the line, even when the line was dissolving beneath their feet. The speedometer hit 100 as she raced toward Antelope Wells, toward whatever horror was emerging there. In the distance, something massive broke through the desert floor, a shape that should not exist, could not exist, but did. The sleeper was awake, and the world would never be the same.